The city breathes in shadow and exhales fear. Gotham exists in perpetual twilight, a metropolis trapped between the dying amber of sunset and the crimson promise of night. Art Deco spires pierce the brooding sky like Gothic prayers, their sleek surfaces reflecting the glow of zeppelins that drift between towering monuments to human ambition. Steam rises from manholes in ghostly columns, carrying with it the whispered legends of the streets below. This is not merely a city, it is a living entity, pulsing with the heartbeat of 8 million souls who know, whether they admit it or not, that something moves in the darkness above them. The rain begins, as it always does in Gotham, without warning, without mercy. It cascades down the angular faces of skyscrapers, transforming elegant architecture into weeping monoliths. Neon signs flicker to life in response, casting pools of electric blue and toxic green across rain-slicked streets. The colors bleed into the darkness like watercolors on wet paper, creating a canvas where nightmares take shape. Officer Renee Montoya adjusts her rearview mirror for the third time in 10 minutes, her brown eyes scanning the labyrinthine alleyways that branch off from the main thoroughfare like arteries from a diseased heart. This is her first night patrol in the East End, and the veteran officer's warnings echo in her mind like mantras of survival. Stay in the car after midnight. Never chase shadows into dead-end alleys. And whatever you do, don't look up. But Montoya has always been the type to look up. The radio crackles with the voice of dispatch, a tired woman whose name Montoya has never learned, but whose exhaustion she recognizes in every clipped syllable. All units, we have reports of a disturbance at the Ace chemical plant. Possible break-in. Units 47 and 23, respond. Montoya reaches for her radio, but something makes her pause. A movement in her peripheral vision, a darkness that seems to move against the natural flow of shadow. She turns her head slowly, following her instincts rather than her training, and sees him. Or rather, she sees the absence of him. The Batman exists in the negative space between light and dark, a figure carved from the very essence of night itself. He stands motionless on the edge of a fire escape, 40 feet above the street, cape spread wide, like the wings of some primordial creature, awakening from eons of slumber. For a moment that stretches into eternity, Montoya forgets to breathe. This is the myth made manifest, the urban legend that has grown in the telling until it has become something more than human, something approaching the divine. Then he moves. It is not the movement of a man, but of liquid shadow given purpose. The cape billows and folds, and suddenly he is gone, not fled, not hidden, but simply absent, as if he had never been there at all. Montoya blinks hard, wondering if she has imagined it all. But the image burns in her retinas like a camera flash. The pointed ears silhouetted against storm clouds, the white eye slits that seem to pierce straight through her soul, the symbol on his chest that even from this distance she could make out a bat, wings spread in eternal warning. The radio crackles again. Unit 12, what's your status? Montoya lifts the handset with trembling fingers. Unit 12 responding. All quiet in Sector 7. Seddon. But it isn't quiet. Not really. In the distance, she can hear the wail of sirens converging on the chemical plant, the sound of helicopters cutting through the rain-heavy air, the staccato rhythm of automatic weapons fire that stops as suddenly as it began. And beneath it all, threading through the urban symphony like a bass note played on the city's spine, is the whisper of wings cutting through darkness. The shadows shift and dance in her peripheral vision, and Montoya begins to understand that she is no longer merely a police officer on patrol. She has become a witness to something larger than herself, a chronicler of legends in the making. The stories she has heard in the precinct break room suddenly take on new weight. The bank robber found hanging upside down from a gargoyle, babbling about a demon with yellow eyes. The drug dealers who swear they saw their leader dragged into the darkness by something that moved like smoke and struck like lightning. The mugger who turned himself in rather than spend another night on the streets, claiming that the bat had looked into his soul and found him wanting. As Montoya sits in her patrol car, rain drumming against the windshield like fingertips on a coffin lid, she begins to see shapes in the darkness that were not there moments before. The silhouette of a man in a top hat, spinning a coin that catches the streetlight with each revolution. The outline of a woman whose hair seems to writhe with a life of its own, whose every movement suggests danger wrapped in seductive beauty. The hunched form of a creature that might once have been human, now transformed into something that belongs more to nightmare than to nature. These are not merely criminals or madmen. These are the dark archetypes that have risen in response to the light, the yin to Batman's yang, the chaos that defines itself in opposition to his order. They exist in the spaces between sanity and madness, between justice and vengeance, between heroism and vigilantism, and at the center of it all, holding the balance with hands that have never known peace, stands the Dark Knight himself. The radio falls silent. The sirens fade into the distance, but the city continues to whisper its secrets, and Montoya finds herself listening with the desperate attention of a student trying to decode a language she doesn't yet understand. This is Gotham City, where gargoyles are not merely decorative, and where shadows move with purpose and intent. This is a place where legends walk among mortals, where the line between myth and reality has been erased by the simple act of belief. And somewhere in the darkness above, justice wears the face of a bat and moves with the silence of a prayer answered by a god who has forgotten how to smile. As her shift ends and the first pale fingers of dawn begin to probe the spaces between buildings, Montoya drives back to the precinct with a story she knows she will never tell. Who would believe her? Who could possibly understand that she has glimpsed the birth of a new mythology, witnessed the first chapter in a saga that will echo through the streets of Gotham for decades to come? But in her heart, she knows the truth. The Batman is real. The legends are only beginning, and Gotham City will never be the same. In the beginning, there was darkness, and in that darkness, a boy learned that the world was not a safe place, that justice was not guaranteed, and that sometimes the only way to fight monsters is to become something monstrous yourself. The alley has no name on any map, though those who know Gotham's secret history call it Crime Alley. It is a narrow throat of shadow that connects two main arteries, a place where the city's elegant facade gives way to exposed brick and rusted fire escapes. On most nights, it is empty, save for the occasional vagrant or the quick passage of someone who knows better than to linger. But on one particular night, a night that will be remembered long after the names of presidents and kings have faded from memory, it becomes the crucible in which a legend is forged. Thomas Wayne walks with the confident stride of a man who has never known true fear. His wife Martha moves beside him with elegant grace, her pearl necklace catching the dim light from a distant street lamp. Between them, small and trusting, walks 8-year-old Bruce Wayne, his young mind still processing the opera they have just attended. The notes of Mephistopheles linger in his thoughts, a haunting melody that will forever after remind him of the moment when his childhood ended. The man who steps from the shadows is unremarkable in every way, except for the desperation that radiates from him like heat from a fever. Joe Chill, though his name will become seared into history. At this moment, he is nothing more than another casualty of Gotham's indifference, another soul ground down by the city's relentless machinery of want and need. The gun in his hand trembles, not with menace, but with the shake of a man who has never held power over anything, not even his own life. "Your money," he says, and his voice cracks like an adolescent's. "Just give me your money, and nobody gets hurt." Thomas Wayne steps forward, his movements calm and measured. He is a doctor, a healer, a man who has spent his life easing suffering. Even now, faced with naked desperation, his first instinct is to help. "Take it easy, friend. We can work this out." But fear makes beasts of even the gentlest men. The gun barks twice, sharp cracks that echo off the alley walls like thunderclaps in a canyon. Thomas Wayne falls first, his hands clutching at wounds that will not be healed. Martha Wayne's scream dies in her throat as the second bullet finds its mark, her pearl necklace scattering across rain-slick concrete like tears made solid. Bruce Wayne, 8 years old and suddenly alone in the universe, kneels between his parents' cooling bodies and makes a promise that will reshape the world. The words are spoken in a child's voice, broken by grief and terror, but they carry the weight of prophecy. "I swear by the spirits of my parents to avenge their deaths by spending the rest of my life warring on all criminals." 25 years later, the man who was that boy stands in a cave beneath Wayne Manor, surrounded by the technology and symbolism of his crusade. Alfred Pennyworth, now silver-haired and bearing the weight of a quarter-century's worth of shared grief, watches as Bruce examines a prototype suit hanging like a crucified shadow from a titanium frame. "Are you certain about this path, Master Bruce?" Alfred's voice carries the concern of a father, though he has never claimed that title. "There are other ways to honor their memory. Your father's medical foundation, your mother's charity work." "I've tried that, Alfred." Bruce's voice is deeper now, hardened by years of training and tempered by loss that has crystallized into purpose. "I've thrown money at the problem, funded rehabilitation programs, supported political reform. But corruption is like cancer. You can treat the symptoms, but unless you cut out the source, it always comes back." The suit before him is a marriage of science and psychology, every element calculated to strike terror into the hearts of the superstitious and cowardly lot that comprises Gotham's criminal underworld. The cape is designed to create the illusion of wings in motion, while the cowl's pointed ears suggest something predatory, something that hunts in darkness. The chest emblem, a stylized bat with wings spread in eternal warning, serves as both symbol and target, drawing enemy fire away from vital organs, while simultaneously announcing his presence like a battle standard. "The suit is only the beginning," Bruce continues, running his fingers along the armored plating. "I need to become more than just a man. Men are fallible. Men can be bargained with, intimidated, corrupted. But symbols are eternal." Alfred nods slowly, understanding dawning in his weathered features. "You're not planning to become Batman. You're planning to become the idea of Batman. Fear is the ultimate weapon," Bruce replies, and there is something in his voice that Alfred recognizes, the same implacable determination that had driven Thomas Wayne to spend 18 hours in surgery, saving the lives of strangers. Criminals are a superstitious, cowardly lot. They need to believe that justice is not bound by laws or limitations, that it can come for them anywhere, at any time. They need to believe in the Batman. The transformation has been years in the making. After the funeral, young Bruce had disappeared into the world's darkest corners, learning from masters who operated beyond the reach of law and order. In the mountains of Tibet, he studied with monks who taught him to move without sound, to strike without warning, to disappear into shadow like smoke dispersing in wind. In the urban jungles of Southeast Asia, he learned the language of violence from men who killed for governments that officially didn't exist. In the academies of Europe, he studied criminology, psychology, and forensic science with professors who never knew they were training the world's most dangerous vigilante. But perhaps his most important education came not from any martial arts master or university professor, but from a woman whose love had the power to make him question everything he thought he knew about justice and revenge. Andrea Beaumont entered his life like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, and for a brief, shining moment, Bruce Wayne considered the possibility that he might find happiness without the cowl, peace without the mission. The memory of their time together is preserved in perfect detail, crystallized by the alchemy of lost love into something approaching divine torture. Evening walks along the Gotham pier, her hand warm in his as she spoke of dreams that had nothing to do with vengeance. Quiet dinners in restaurants where she would laugh at his terrible jokes, her eyes bright with affection and possibility. The morning when he almost abandoned his vow, when he knelt at his parents' grave and asked for their permission to be happy. "I know I made a promise," he had whispered to the marble headstones, "but I didn't see this coming. I didn't count on falling in love with an angel." But angels, as Bruce learned, do not always choose to stay. Andrea's departure left him hollow but resolved, her absence serving as final confirmation that his path lay not in the light of human connection, but in the darkness of solitary purpose. The pain of her leaving became another tool in his arsenal, another source of strength to draw upon when the mission demanded more than any normal man could give. Now, in the cave that has become his sanctuary and his prison, Bruce Wayne prepares to die so that Batman can be born. The transformation is not merely physical, though the suit's integrated systems turn him into a living weapon, enhancing strength, speed, and perception beyond human limits. The true metamorphosis is psychological, the careful construction of a persona so complete, so thoroughly realized, that it will eventually consume the man who created it. "The city is waiting, Master Bruce," Alfred says softly, checking the communication systems one final time. Commissioner Gordon has lit the signal. Above them, piercing the Gotham night like a prayer made of light, the bat signal cuts through storm clouds and rain. It is a symbol of hope for the innocent and a promise of retribution for the guilty. But more than that, it is a summoning, a call to something that is no longer entirely human, something that exists in the space between justice and vengeance, between heroism and terrorism. Bruce Wayne steps into the suit and feels the last vestige of the frightened child disappear. What emerges is something new, something necessary, something that will either save Gotham City or destroy it in the attempt. The cape settles around his shoulders like wings folding, and in that moment, the Batman is born. The man who walks toward the waiting Batmobile is no longer bound by human limitations or moral certainties. He is justice incarnate, vengeance personified, fear given form and purpose. He is the answer to Gotham's prayers and the fulfillment of its nightmares. He is the Dark Knight, and his war has only just begun. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was chaos, and chaos wore the face of a clown. The man who would become the Joker enters Gotham's mythology not with a bang, but with a giggle. A sound so innocuous that the security guards at Ace Chemicals barely register it as they make their rounds through the facility's maze of pipes and processing tanks. It is only later, when they discover the first body arranged in a grotesque parody of laughter, that they begin to understand they are dealing with something that transcends conventional criminal behavior and approaches the realm of performance art, written in blood and madness. But to understand the Joker, one must first understand the joke, and the joke, as it has always been, is on us. The chemical vat that transforms an unnamed criminal into Gotham's apex predator of madness contains more than the industrial acids and experimental compounds cataloged in GothCorp's safety reports. It holds something far more dangerous, the dissolution of identity itself, the complete erasure of whatever moral and psychological framework once constrained a human being within the boundaries of sanity. The man who falls into those churning chemicals emerges as something new, something unprecedented in the history of human evil, a creature that embodies chaos, not as a philosophy but as an art form. The Joker's first appearance sends ripples of terror through Gotham's criminal underworld that have nothing to do with his body count and everything to do with his methodology. Traditional criminals, even the most vicious psychopaths, operate according to recognizable patterns: greed, revenge, lust for power, territoriality. But the Joker introduces something alien to criminal psychology: the pursuit of chaos for its own sake, violence as punchline, murder as the ultimate practical joke played on the human condition itself. Detective Harvey Bullock stands in the ruins of the Gotham Museum of Natural History, surrounded by exhibits that have been transformed into surreal tableaux of death and absurdity. The security guards have been posed among the dinosaur skeletons, their faces locked in rictus grins that mirror the permanent smile carved into their killer's bleached features. But it is not merely the brutality that unnerves even hardened police officers. It is the artistry, the careful attention to comic timing that transforms multiple homicide into something approaching theatrical performance. "What kind of sick freak does this?" Bullock mutters, photographing a scene where a night watchman has been arranged to appear to be sharing a joke with a Tyrannosaurus Rex, both figures frozen in poses of eternal laughter. Commissioner Gordon adjusts his glasses, studying crime scene photos that seem to document the work of a madman with a master's degree in dramatic composition. "Someone who doesn't see murder as a crime," he says quietly. "Someone who sees it as a form of entertainment." But 60 feet above, perched on a gargoyle that has watched over Gotham for nearly a century, Batman conducts his own analysis with methods that blend forensic science with psychological profiling that borders on the supernatural. The Joker's crimes follow a logic that conventional investigation cannot penetrate, not the linear cause and effect reasoning of normal human behavior, but the circular, self-referential structure of comedy itself, where the punchline justifies the setup, and the setup exists only to enable the punchline. The laughing gas residue found at each crime scene tells a story that challenges everything Batman thought he understood about criminal motivation. This is not a weapon designed to incapacitate victims for robbery or kidnapping. It is a tool for transformation, a chemical comedy that literally rewrites the victim's final moments to match the killer's aesthetic vision. The gas forces its victims to die laughing, not merely as a method of murder, but as a statement about the fundamental absurdity of existence itself. Alfred, I'm uploading chemical analysis to the Bat computer. Batman speaks into his communicator, his voice carrying the controlled tension of a man processing information that challenges his understanding of evil itself. Cross-reference with all known compounds capable of inducing simultaneous euphoria and respiratory failure. Alfred's response crackles through encrypted channels, his British accent lending an air of civilization to discussions of homicidal innovation. I'm afraid the chemical signature is unique, sir. Whoever created this compound has a sophisticated understanding of neurotransmitter manipulation. Batman's investigation leads him through Gotham's underworld, like Dante descending through circles of hell, each level revealing new depths of the Joker's influence on the city's criminal ecosystem. Traditional mob bosses find their operations disrupted not by police interference, but by something far more unsettling. A criminal who operates according to no recognizable code, who destroys profit margins and territorial agreements, not for strategic advantage, but for the sheer joy of watching order collapse into chaos. The pattern becomes clear only when Batman begins thinking like the Joker himself, not as a detective seeking evidence, but as a comedian crafting the perfect joke. Each crime is a setup, each victim a straight man, each investigation a performance where the audience is meant to discover that they, too, are part of the show. The Joker doesn't merely commit crimes, he creates experiences, moments where the boundary between tragedy and comedy dissolves into something that transcends both. The confrontation, when it comes, takes place in the abandoned Ace Chemicals facility, where the Joker's transformation began. A location chosen not for strategic advantage but for poetic symmetry, the completion of a cosmic joke that began with one man's fall into madness and concludes with another man's descent into the same abyss. The factory floor has been transformed into a funhouse mirror version of its former self. Pipes and walkways rearranged into patterns that suggest both industrial functionality and carnival architecture. Welcome to my origin story, Batman. The Joker's voice echoes through the facility with the theatrical projection of a Shakespearean actor addressing the cheap seats. I've been saving the best joke for last, the one where you realize that you and I aren't opposites at all, but two sides of the same coin. The Joker who emerges from the shadows is a study in contrasts that should not coexist. Elegant in his purple suit and formal bearing, grotesque in his chalk-white skin and crimson lips, dignified in his posture and completely unhinged in his movements. He is a walking contradiction, a figure who embodies sophistication and savagery in equal measure, whose every gesture suggests both courtly manners and barely contained violence. But it is his voice that truly captures the essence of what he has become. Mark Hamill's definitive interpretation that transforms the Joker from mere comic book villain into something approaching mythic archetype. The vocal performance captures not just madness, but a specific type of madness, the kind that comes from understanding too much rather than too little, from seeing through the illusions that allow normal people to function and finding only emptiness beneath the surface of civilized behavior. You want to know the real joke, Batsy? The Joker's laughter rises and falls like a musical composition written in hysteria. The joke is that there is no joke, no meaning, no purpose, no grand design, just entropy, wearing a party hat and dancing on the grave of human dignity. Batman circles his opponent with the patience of a predator, but also with something approaching respect. The Joker represents everything Batman fights against: chaos, meaninglessness, the triumph of irrationality over justice. But he also represents something Batman recognizes in himself, a man transformed by trauma into something beyond normal human parameters, a creature defined entirely by his response to the fundamental unfairness of existence. "You're wrong," Batman says, his voice carrying the weight of a man who has stared into the same abyss and chosen differently. Meaning isn't something you find, it's something you create. Purpose isn't given, it's earned. Oh, but that's the beautiful part. The Joker's grin widens impossibly, his face becoming a mask of pure, malicious joy. You think you've chosen justice, but all you've really chosen is a different kind of madness. You dress up like a bat and beat up criminals because it makes you feel better about your parents' death. How is that any saner than what I do? The battle that follows is less a physical confrontation than a philosophical debate conducted through violence. The Joker's weapons are designed not merely to kill but to corrupt, to transform their targets into unwilling participants in his cosmic joke. Flower boutonniere that spray acid, joy buzzers that deliver lethal electrical charges, playing cards sharpened to razor edges. Each item in his arsenal speaks to his belief that the tools of celebration can be transformed into instruments of destruction. Batman counters not just with superior martial arts and tactical equipment, but with something the Joker cannot comprehend: the stubborn insistence that order can emerge from chaos, that meaning can be imposed on meaninglessness through the simple act of choosing to care about justice. Every move in their deadly dance speaks to the fundamental conflict between nihilism and purpose, between the philosophy of the void and the religion of responsibility. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of their confrontation is the moment when Batman glimpses the man the Joker once was, fragments of personality that surface briefly before being submerged again in the acid bath of absolute madness. For an instant, he sees someone who might have been saved, someone whose transformation into chaos incarnate was not inevitable but chosen, moment by moment, choice by choice, until salvation became impossible and damnation became art. "You know what the best part is, Batman?" the Joker whispers as their battle reaches its crescendo. Both men balanced on a catwalk above the same chemical vats that transformed a man into a monster. "Someday you'll understand the joke. Someday you'll realize that all your noble intentions, all your precious morality, all your desperate attempts to save this rotting city, none of it matters. And when that day comes, when you finally get the punchline, you'll laugh too." The ending, when it comes, is not resolution but temporary cessation. The Joker captured but not defeated, contained but not cured, silenced but not silenced forever. As he is led away to Arkham Asylum, straitjacketed and sedated but still giggling softly to himself, he leaves behind more than just crime scenes and trauma. He leaves behind a question that will haunt Batman for the rest of his crusade. What separates the pursuit of justice from the pursuit of chaos? And how thin is the line between heroic purpose and heroic madness? In the depths of Arkham, the Joker settles into his cell with the satisfaction of a comedian who has delivered his best material to an appreciative audience. The walls are covered with his artwork, sketches, and jokes, and philosophical observations that document the intersection of humor and horror. And somewhere in those manic scribblings, barely visible in the corner of a page filled with laughing skulls and grinning tombstones, is a small notation: HQ, potential new partner in crime and comedy. The seeds of future chaos have been planted, and in the shadow of the Joker's influence, something new is beginning to take shape, something that will transform his solitary madness into a duet of destruction, his single voice into a harmony of havoc. But that story belongs to another section, another chapter in the epic saga of Gotham's mythology. For now, it is enough to know that the Joker exists, that chaos has found its perfect avatar, and that Batman's war against the darkness has acquired its most dangerous and most incomprehensible enemy. The joke, as always, is far from over. Love, when it dies, leaves behind permafrost in the human heart. Dr. Victor Fries had been many things in his life before tragedy reduced him to a single, burning purpose, wrapped in armor that couldn't warm the ice that had crystallized around his soul. He had been a brilliant cryogenicist, a devoted husband, a man who believed that science could conquer even death itself. But on the night when corporate greed and personal ambition shattered his world like glass struck by Arctic wind, all of those identities fell away, leaving only the essence of what he would become. A man frozen in time at the moment of his greatest loss, condemned to relive that anguish for eternity. The story begins not with violence or madness, but with the kind of quiet desperation that drives good men to attempt impossible things. Nora Fries lies in cryogenic suspension within a chamber that hums with the soft whisper of supercooled gases, her face peaceful beneath layers of frost that have transformed her into something resembling a sleeping princess from a fairy tale written in liquid nitrogen. The rare blood disease that courses through her veins has no name in any medical textbook, no cure in any pharmacy, no hope except for the promise that future science might accomplish what present knowledge cannot. Victor tends to her with the devotion of a monk maintaining a sacred flame, checking temperature readings and adjusting flow rates with movements that have been refined by repetition into something approaching prayer. His love for her is not the passionate fire of youth, but the steady burn of a man who has found his purpose in another person's survival. When he speaks to her sleeping form, his words carry the weight of promises that stretch beyond the boundaries of what any rational man would attempt. "The doctors say 18 months, he whispers, breath-forming clouds in the frigid air of his laboratory. 18 months to find a cure for something that has never been cured. But they don't understand what I understand. That love is the only force in the universe stronger than entropy. I will not let you go, Nora. I will not let death take you from me." But love, as Victor is about to learn, is not armor against the cruelties of a world that values profit over promise, expedience over ethics. The knock on his laboratory door comes at 3:17 a.m., delivered by men whose expensive suits cannot disguise their function as well-dressed thugs. Behind them walks Ferris Boyle, CEO of GothCorp, and a man whose understanding of human suffering extends only as far as its potential impact on quarterly earnings. "Dr. Fries." Boyle's voice carries the false warmth of a politician delivering bad news. "I'm afraid we need to discuss the termination of your research project." Victor's hands freeze on the temperature controls, though whether from shock or rage is impossible to determine. Termination? We're on the verge of a breakthrough. The cellular regeneration process is showing promise. I just need more time. Time is money, doctor. And frankly, your project has consumed more of both than the board is willing to continue investing. Boyle gestures at Nora's suspension chamber, with the casual dismissal of a man discussing inventory reduction. The equipment needs to be liquidated. The lab space has been reassigned to more profitable ventures. You can't do this. Victor's voice carries the desperation of a man watching his universe collapse in real time. She'll die without the suspension system. The disease will kill her within hours. Boyle shrugs with the practiced indifference of corporate management delivering disappointing but inevitable news. That's unfortunate, but not my problem. You have until morning to clear out your personal effects. What happens next unfolds with the terrible inevitability of Greek tragedy. Victor's desperate attempts to preserve Nora's life become acts of industrial sabotage in the eyes of corporate security. His refusal to abandon the laboratory becomes criminal trespass. His passionate defense of his wife's suspension chamber becomes assault on corporate personnel. And when Boyle personally moves to disconnect the cryogenic systems that maintain Nora's frozen sleep, Victor's protective instincts trigger a confrontation that will literally reshape both men's destinies. The accident, though accident, is perhaps too generous a term for the collision of desperation with callous indifference, occurs when Victor's attempt to prevent the disconnection results in the catastrophic rupture of coolant lines. Carrying liquid nitrogen at temperatures that can freeze human flesh solid in seconds, the spray catches Victor full in the face and chest, flash freezing skin and muscle and nerve endings in a process that should have killed him instantly. Instead, it transforms him. The metamorphosis that claims Victor Fries is not the dramatic Hollywood transformation of movie monsters, but something far more subtle and infinitely more tragic. The supercooled chemicals don't just damage his body, they fundamentally alter his metabolism, requiring him to exist at sub-zero temperatures that would kill normal humans instantly. His skin becomes pale as Arctic ice, his breath a constant cloud of vapor, his touch capable of freezing anything he handles without the protection of his specially designed suit. But the physical transformation is merely the visible manifestation of a deeper change. The man who emerges from the wreckage of his laboratory has been stripped of every human comfort except one: the memory of love. That memory becomes both his salvation and his damnation, the single flame that prevents his transformation from consuming his sanity entirely, while simultaneously ensuring that he can never escape the agony of his loss. The suit he constructs is a masterpiece of engineering, born from absolute necessity. Powered by a fusion reactor that generates the sub-zero temperatures required to maintain his altered physiology, It transforms him into a walking avatar of winter itself. The freeze gun mounted on his right arm can drop temperatures to absolute zero in seconds, turning moisture in the air into weapons of crystallized death. The helmet's heads-up display provides thermal imaging that allows him to perceive the world as patterns of heat and cold, while the built-in life support systems maintain the Arctic environment his body now requires to function. But perhaps the suit's most important feature is the photograph mounted on the left side of his chest plate. Nora's face, forever young, forever smiling, forever beyond his reach. It serves as both motivation and torment, a reminder of what he has lost and what he continues to fight to preserve. His first appearance in Gotham sends temperatures plummeting across 6 city blocks, transforming a muggy summer evening into something resembling nuclear winter. The bank robbery that brings him to public attention is not motivated by greed, but by desperate necessity. He needs funding to rebuild his laboratory, to purchase equipment that might allow him to continue his research, to maintain the hope that somewhere in the intersection of love and science lies the key to Nora's salvation. But the man who calls himself Mr. Freeze is no longer capable of caring about collateral damage. The security guards who try to stop him become ice sculptures, their final expressions of terror preserved in crystalline perfection. The police officers who respond to the alarm find themselves battling an opponent who treats human life as merely another variable in his cryogenic equations. Batman's investigation into the frozen crime scenes reveals layers of tragedy that challenge even his comprehensive understanding of Gotham's capacity for producing monsters. The forensic evidence tells a story of scientific brilliance twisted into criminal obsession, love transformed into something approaching madness. But beneath the surface of apparent villainy, Batman recognizes something that strikes uncomfortably close to his own psychological foundation. A man defined entirely by loss, driven by the impossible dream of undoing the past. The confrontation between Batman and Mr. Freeze takes place in the ruins of the old GothCorp facility, where ice has claimed every surface and transformed industrial architecture into something resembling a cathedral built from frozen tears. Freeze moves through this Arctic environment with the grace of a creature perfectly adapted to its habitat, while Batman struggles with equipment that was never designed to function at temperatures that approach the theoretical limits of matter itself. "You cannot stop me, Batman." Freeze's voice carries the mechanical precision of his suit's vocal synthesizers, but beneath the electronic distortion lies something recognizably human pain given voice through technology. "I have nothing left to lose, and everything still to save." "I've read your file, Freeze," Batman replies, his breath forming clouds that instantly crystallize and fall like snow. "I know about Nora. I know about GothCorp. But this isn't justice, it's revenge." "Justice?" Freeze's laugh emerges as a sound like breaking glass. "Justice died when they pulled the plug on my wife's life support. Justice froze to death in a corporate boardroom, where human life is measured in quarterly profits." The battle that follows is less a fight than a collision of worldviews, each man wielding technology that represents his particular form of grief made manifest. Batman's arsenal of thermal charges and heating elements speaks to his faith in preparation and technology as solutions to human problems. Freeze's cryogenic weapons embody his belief that the world must be made to share his pain, that if he cannot know warmth, then warmth itself must be eliminated from existence. But the true confrontation occurs not in the exchange of freeze rays and heat bombs, but in the moment when Batman presents Victor with surveillance footage of Ferris Boyle's true nature, not merely corporate greed, but active malice. The deliberate destruction of Victor's research, not for financial reasons, but for personal satisfaction. Boyle had been stealing Victor's work, planning to take credit for any breakthrough while ensuring that Victor could never expose the theft. "He murdered her twice," Freeze whispers, his voice barely audible through the suit's speakers. "Once when he destroyed the equipment, and again when he stole the research that might have saved her." Batman watches as Victor's rage crystallizes into something purer and more terrible than mere vengeance. This is not the fury of a criminal denied his prize, but the righteous anger of a man who has discovered that his wife's death was not tragedy but murder, not accident but calculated cruelty. For a moment, Batman glimpses the man Victor had been: brilliant, compassionate, driven by love rather than loss, and recognizes in him a reflection of his own capacity for monstrous justice. The choice Victor makes in that moment defines the boundary between hero and villain in ways that will echo through Gotham's mythology for decades to come. He could turn his weapons on Batman, could continue his campaign of frozen terror against a city that had failed to protect what he loved most. Instead, he makes a different choice, one that speaks to the fundamental difference between justice and revenge, between heroism and vigilantism. Boyle dies, Freeze states with mechanical precision, but the others, the innocent people caught in my war, I will not let my grief become their doom. Together, Batman and Mr. Freeze descend upon GothCorp's executive offices like winter personified, bringing with them a justice that is both terrible and precise. Boyle's final moments are spent encased in ice that preserves every detail of his expression, not the peaceful slumber of Nora's suspension, but the contorted features of a man who finally understands the consequences of treating human life as a commodity to be traded and discarded at will. But even justice, when it comes at the cost of one's humanity, carries its own form of damnation. As Boyle's frozen corpse stands like a monument to corporate evil, Victor realizes that his transformation is complete, not merely physical, but spiritual. He has become something that exists outside the normal parameters of human experience, forever trapped at temperatures that prevent him from touching another human being without causing them harm. I cannot undo what was done, Victor tells Batman as they stand amid the ruins of GothCorp's empire of ice. But perhaps I can ensure that others do not suffer as Nora suffered, as I have suffered. Batman nods slowly, recognizing in Victor something he has seen in his own reflection. A man who has chosen to become a monster in service of a greater good, even knowing that the transformation will cost him everything that makes life worth living. Arkham has a specialized wing. They can maintain the environmental controls you need while you continue your research, under supervision. And Nora? I'll see that she's transferred to a facility that can maintain her suspension while you work on a cure. You have my word. Victor's acceptance comes not as surrender, but as the recognition that some forms of justice require a lifetime of penance. As he walks toward the police transport vehicles that have been modified to accommodate his unique needs, his suit's systems maintaining the sub-zero environment that keeps him alive, he carries with him both the burden of what he has become and the possibility of what he might yet accomplish. The photograph on his chest plate catches the first light of dawn, Nora's face smiling with the eternal optimism of love that refuses to acknowledge its own limitations. In that image lies both Victor's salvation and his damnation, the memory of warmth that keeps him human, and the reminder of what he has lost that ensures he can never again be entirely human. Mr. Freeze's story becomes a touchstone for everything that follows in Gotham's mythic landscape, proof that even the most monstrous transformations can preserve a core of humanity, that love can survive even when it becomes the very thing that destroys us. In a city where madness wears 1,000 faces, Victor Freeze represents something uniquely tragic, a villain whose crimes stem not from evil, but from love taken to its absolute extreme. And in the depths of Arkham Asylum, where winter never ends and hope crystallizes into something resembling prayer, the man who was once Dr. Victor Freeze continues his research, driven by the belief that somewhere in the intersection of science and devotion lies the key to resurrection itself. His laboratory has become a shrine to the possibility that death, like ice, is only a temporary state, and that love, properly applied, can melt even the coldest heart. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was chaos, and chaos wore the face of a clown. The man who would become the Joker enters Gotham's mythology not with a bang, but with a giggle. A sound so innocuous that the security guards at Ace Chemicals barely register it as they make their rounds through the facility's maze of pipes and processing tanks. It is only later, when they discover the first body arranged in a grotesque parody of laughter, that they begin to understand they are dealing with something that transcends conventional criminal behavior and approaches the realm of performance art, written in blood and madness. But to understand the Joker, one must first understand the joke, and the joke, as it has always been, is on us. The chemical vat that transforms an unnamed criminal into Gotham's apex predator of madness contains more than the industrial acids and experimental compounds cataloged in GothCorp's safety reports. It holds something far more dangerous: the dissolution of identity itself, the complete erasure of whatever moral and psychological framework once constrained a human being within the boundaries of sanity. The man who falls into those churning chemicals emerges as something new, something unprecedented in the history of human evil, a creature that embodies chaos, not as a philosophy but as an art form. The Joker's first appearance sends ripples of terror through Gotham's criminal underworld that have nothing to do with his body count and everything to do with his methodology. Traditional criminals, even the most vicious psychopaths, operate according to recognizable patterns: greed, revenge, lust for power, territoriality. But the Joker introduces something alien to criminal psychology: the pursuit of chaos for its own sake, violence as punchline, murder as the ultimate practical joke played on the human condition itself. Detective Harvey Bullock stands in the ruins of the Gotham Museum of Natural History, surrounded by exhibits that have been transformed into surreal tableaux of death and absurdity. The security guards have been posed among the dinosaur skeletons, their faces locked in rictus grins that mirror the permanent smile carved into their killer's bleached features. But it is not merely the brutality that unnerves even hardened police officers. It is the artistry, the careful attention to comic timing that transforms multiple homicide into something approaching theatrical performance. "What kind of sick freak does this?" Bullock mutters, photographing a scene where a night watchman has been arranged to appear to be sharing a joke with a Tyrannosaurus Rex, both figures frozen in poses of eternal laughter. Commissioner Gordon adjusts his glasses, studying crime scene photos that seem to document the work of a madman with a master's degree in dramatic composition. "Someone who doesn't see murder as a crime," he says quietly. "Someone who sees it as a form of entertainment." But 60 feet above, perched on a gargoyle that has watched over Gotham for nearly a century, Batman conducts his own analysis with methods that blend forensic science with psychological profiling that borders on the supernatural. The Joker's crimes follow a logic that conventional investigation cannot penetrate, not the linear cause and effect reasoning of normal human behavior, but the circular, self-referential structure of comedy itself, where the punchline justifies the setup and the setup exists only to enable the punchline. The laughing gas residue found at each crime scene tells a story that challenges everything Batman thought he understood about criminal motivation. This is not a weapon designed to incapacitate victims for robbery or kidnapping. It is a tool for transformation, a chemical comedy that literally rewrites the victim's final moments to match the killer's aesthetic vision. The gas forces its victims to die laughing, not merely as a method of murder, but as a statement about the fundamental absurdity of existence itself. "Alfred, I'm uploading chemical analysis to the Bat computer." Batman speaks into his communicator, his voice carrying the controlled tension of a man processing information that challenges his understanding of evil itself. Cross-reference with all known compounds capable of inducing simultaneous euphoria and respiratory failure. Alfred's response crackles through encrypted channels, his British accent lending an air of civilization to discussions of homicidal innovation. "I'm afraid the chemical signature is unique, sir. Whoever created this compound has a sophisticated understanding of neurotransmitter manipulation." Batman's investigation leads him through Gotham's underworld, like Dante descending through circles of hell, each level revealing new depths of the Joker's influence on the city's criminal ecosystem. Traditional mob bosses find their operations disrupted not by police interference, but by something far more unsettling: a criminal who operates according to no recognizable code, who destroys profit margins and territorial agreements, not for strategic advantage, but for the sheer joy of watching order collapse into chaos. The pattern becomes clear only when Batman begins thinking like the Joker himself, not as a detective seeking evidence, but as a comedian crafting the perfect joke. Each crime is a setup, each victim a straight man, each investigation a performance where the audience is meant to discover that they, too, are part of the show. The Joker doesn't merely commit crimes, he creates experiences, moments where the boundary between tragedy and comedy dissolves into something that transcends both. The confrontation, when it comes, takes place in the abandoned Ace Chemicals facility, where the Joker's transformation began. A location chosen not for strategic advantage but for poetic symmetry, the completion of a cosmic joke that began with one man's fall into madness and concludes with another man's descent into the same abyss. The factory floor has been transformed into a funhouse mirror version of its former self. Pipes and walkways rearranged into patterns that suggest both industrial functionality and carnival architecture. Welcome to my origin story, Batman. The Joker's voice echoes through the facility with the theatrical projection of a Shakespearean actor addressing the cheap seats. I've been saving the best joke for last, the one where you realize that you and I aren't opposites at all, but two sides of the same coin. The Joker who emerges from the shadows is a study in contrasts that should not coexist. Elegant in his purple suit and formal bearing, grotesque in his chalk-white skin and crimson lips, dignified in his posture and completely unhinged in his movements. He is a walking contradiction, a figure who embodies sophistication and savagery in equal measure, whose every gesture suggests both courtly manners and barely contained violence. But it is his voice that truly captures the essence of what he has become. Mark Hamill's definitive interpretation that transforms the Joker from mere comic book villain into something approaching mythic archetype. The vocal performance captures not just madness, but a specific type of madness, the kind that comes from understanding too much rather than too little, from seeing through the illusions that allow normal people to function and finding only emptiness beneath the surface of civilized behavior. You want to know the real joke, Batsy? The Joker's laughter rises and falls like a musical composition written in hysteria. The joke is that there is no joke, no meaning, no purpose, no grand design, just entropy, wearing a party hat and dancing on the grave of human dignity. Batman circles his opponent with the patience of a predator, but also with something approaching respect. The Joker represents everything Batman fights against: chaos, meaninglessness, the triumph of irrationality over justice. But he also represents something Batman recognizes in himself: a man transformed by trauma into something beyond normal human parameters, a creature defined entirely by his response to the fundamental unfairness of existence. "You're wrong," Batman says, his voice carrying the weight of a man who has stared into the same abyss and chosen differently. Meaning isn't something you find, it's something you create. Purpose isn't given, it's earned. Oh, but that's the beautiful part. The Joker's grin widens impossibly, his face becoming a mask of pure, malicious joy. You think you've chosen justice, but all you've really chosen is a different kind of madness. You dress up like a bat and beat up criminals because it makes you feel better about your parents' death. How is that any saner than what I do? The battle that follows is less a physical confrontation than a philosophical debate conducted through violence. The Joker's weapons are designed not merely to kill but to corrupt, to transform their targets into unwilling participants in his cosmic joke. Flower boutonniere that spray acid, joy buzzers that deliver lethal electrical charges, playing cards sharpened to razor edges. Each item in his arsenal speaks to his belief that the tools of celebration can be transformed into instruments of destruction. Batman counters not just with superior martial arts and tactical equipment, but with something the Joker cannot comprehend: the stubborn insistence that order can emerge from chaos, that meaning can be imposed on meaninglessness through the simple act of choosing to care about justice. Every move in their deadly dance speaks to the fundamental conflict between nihilism and purpose, between the philosophy of the void and the religion of responsibility. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of their confrontation is the moment when Batman glimpses the man the Joker once was, fragments of personality that surface briefly before being submerged again in the acid bath of absolute madness. For an instant, he sees someone who might have been saved, someone whose transformation into chaos incarnate was not inevitable but chosen, moment by moment, choice by choice, until salvation became impossible and damnation became art. "You know what the best part is, Batman?" the Joker whispers as their battle reaches its crescendo. Both men balanced on a catwalk above the same chemical vats that transformed a man into a monster. "Someday you'll understand the joke. Someday you'll realize that all your noble intentions, all your precious morality, all your desperate attempts to save this rotting city, none of it matters. And when that day comes, when you finally get the punchline, you'll laugh too. The ending, when it comes, is not resolution but temporary cessation. The Joker captured but not defeated, contained but not cured, silenced but not silenced forever. As he is led away to Arkham Asylum, straitjacketed and sedated but still giggling softly to himself, he leaves behind more than just crime scenes and trauma. He leaves behind a question that will haunt Batman for the rest of his crusade. What separates the pursuit of justice from the pursuit of chaos? And how thin is the line between heroic purpose and heroic madness? In the depths of Arkham, the Joker settles into his cell with the satisfaction of a comedian who has delivered his best material to an appreciative audience. The walls are covered with his artwork, sketches, and jokes, and philosophical observations that document the intersection of humor and horror. And somewhere in those manic scribblings, barely visible in the corner of a page filled with laughing skulls and grinning tombstones, is a small notation. HQ, potential new partner in crime and comedy. The seeds of future chaos have been planted, and in the shadow of the Joker's influence, something new is beginning to take shape. Something that will transform his solitary madness into a duet of destruction, his single voice into a harmony of havoc. But that story belongs to another section, another chapter in the epic saga of Gotham's mythology. For now, it is enough to know that the Joker exists, that chaos has found its perfect avatar, and that Batman's war against the darkness has acquired its most dangerous and most incomprehensible enemy. The joke, as always, is far from over. In the pantheon of Gotham's tragedies, no fall cuts deeper than that of a man who dedicated his life to justice, only to discover that justice itself is a double-edged coin that can land on either side of morality. Harvey Dent stands at the podium of Gotham City Hall, his handsome features illuminated by camera flashes that capture what history will remember as the last moment of his innocence. The man addressing the crowd embodies everything Gotham's citizens dare to hope for: a prosecutor whose integrity cannot be bought, whose determination cannot be broken, whose vision of justice burns with the righteous fire of absolute moral clarity. He is the White Knight to Batman's Dark Knight, the legitimate face of law and order that makes the vigilante's shadow war seem unnecessary, perhaps even obsolete. Today marks the beginning of the end for organized crime in Gotham City, Harvey declares, his voice carrying the confident authority of a man who has never doubted his place on the right side of history. The Falcone crime family's reign of terror ends here, with the testimony of their own accountant and the evidence that will finally bring them to justice. But even as Harvey speaks these words, forces are already in motion that will transform his moment of triumph into the first act of his personal apocalypse. In the shadows of the courtroom, Sal Maroni, a crime boss whose brutality is matched only by his cunning, prepares to demonstrate that in Gotham City, justice is just another commodity to be bought, sold, or destroyed according to market forces. The friendship between Harvey Dent and Bruce Wayne represents something rare in Gotham's poisoned social ecosystem, a genuine bond between two men who share a vision of what their city could become if corruption could be rooted out and justice could be allowed to flourish. They meet regularly at the gym, sparring partners who push each other to physical and intellectual limits while discussing philosophy, politics, and the eternal question of whether evil can be defeated through legal channels or requires more direct intervention. You're fighting a war with both hands tied behind your back, Bruce tells Harvey during one of their evening workouts, toweling sweat from his face while carefully concealing the fresh bruises and cuts that mark his nocturnal activities as Batman. The system is designed to protect the people who corrupt it. Harvey lands a solid combination on the heavy bag, his movements precise and controlled, a man channeling frustration into productive violence. That's exactly why the system has to work, Bruce. The moment we abandon legal justice for vigilante action, we become no better than the criminals we're fighting. Batman may be helping in the short term, but what happens when he decides that someone like you or me is the problem? The irony of this conversation, Bruce Wayne being warned about the dangers of Batman by the very man whose tragedy will vindicate both identities, is lost on neither participant, though only one of them understands the full weight of the exchange. Harvey's faith in institutional justice represents everything Bruce once believed in and ultimately rejected, after witnessing the system's inability to prevent his parents' murder. Yet in Harvey, Bruce sees a reflection of what he might have become if he had chosen law school instead of the path of the vigilante. Dr. HARLEQUIN'S psychiatric evaluation of Harvey Dent, conducted in the weeks leading up to the Maroney trial, reveals fault lines in the prosecutor's psyche that run deeper than anyone suspects. Her notes, written in the precise handwriting of a woman who believes that understanding human behavior is the key to healing human suffering, document a man wrestling with internal contradictions that mirror the moral complexities of the city he serves. Subject displays classic symptoms of obsessive-compulsive behavior, centered around concepts of fairness and justice, Dr. Quinzel writes. His reliance on coin flipping to make minor decisions appears to be a coping mechanism for dealing with the weight of life and death choices inherent in his position. When asked about this behavior, he jokes that chance is the only truly fair judge, but there's an underlying anxiety that suggests deeper psychological pressure. The coin itself, Harvey's lucky two-headed silver dollar, inherited from his father, serves as both talisman and torture device, a physical manifestation of his belief that justice should be blind and impartial. He flips it constantly, compulsively, using its results to determine everything from which restaurant to choose for lunch to which witness to call first in important cases. What appears to be a harmless quirk is actually the external expression of a mind struggling to maintain perfect objectivity in a world where perfect objectivity is impossible. The trial of boss Sal Maroney becomes the crucible in which Harvey's faith in the system will be tested to its breaking point. The courtroom scenes unfold with the dramatic intensity of grand opera, each witness and piece of evidence representing another movement in a symphony of justice that promises to restore harmony to Gotham's discordant social order. Harvey prosecutes with the passion of a crusader, presenting evidence that should be sufficient to put Maroney away for multiple lifetimes, while simultaneously exposing the network of corruption that has allowed organized crime to flourish under the protection of bought judges and intimidated juries. But Maroney possesses something more powerful than evidence or legal precedent. He has access to the fundamental truth that in Gotham City, justice is just another service industry, and like all service industries, it operates according to the principle that the customer is always right, especially when the customer has enough money to purchase whatever outcome they desire. The attack comes during Harvey's closing argument, at the moment when his eloquence has reached its peak, and victory seems assured. Maroney's movement is swift and practiced, a man who has learned that when legal channels fail, direct action often succeeds. The glass of acid he hurls across the courtroom moves in slow motion through the air, catching fluorescent light and transforming it into something resembling liquid fire. Harvey's reflexes are those of an athlete and a fighter, honed by years of gym workouts and street confrontations with criminals who prefer physical intimidation to legal argument. He begins to turn away from the trajectory of the thrown acid, but physics and chemistry operate according to laws more implacable than any statute in Gotham's legal code. The acid catches him along the left side of his face and neck, burning through skin and muscle and nerve endings with the methodical efficiency of industrial-strength dissolution. The screams that echo through the courtroom are not merely expressions of physical agony. They are the death cries of a man's fundamental faith in justice, order, and the possibility that good can triumph over evil through legitimate channels. As Harvey collapses to the floor, his face literally melting under the chemical assault, something else dies with him. The belief that Batman's methods are unnecessary, that corruption can be fought with subpoenas rather than vigilante violence. The physical transformation that claims Harvey Dent is horrific. In its completeness, the left side of his face becomes a landscape of scar tissue and exposed bone, his eye reduced to a milky orb that can no longer see the world with normal human vision. But the psychological transformation is far more subtle and infinitely more dangerous. The acid doesn't just destroy his appearance. It dissolves the mental barriers that have kept his obsessive-compulsive tendencies in check, allowing suppressed aspects of his personality to surface and take control. Dr. Quinzel's emergency psychiatric evaluation, conducted in the secure wing of Gotham General Hospital, documents the emergence of what she terms a secondary personality structure that embodies everything Harvey Dent had spent his career fighting against. The man who awakens from surgery is no longer the idealistic prosecutor who believed in the perfectibility of human institutions. He is something new, something unprecedented in psychiatric literature, a living embodiment of moral duality. The scarred side of his personality appears to embrace chaos, violence, and criminal behavior. Dr. Face. Quinzel notes, her handwriting betraying increasing agitation as she struggles to understand what she is witnessing. He refers to this aspect of himself as Big Bad Harv, and seems to regard it as a separate entity with its own agenda and moral code. The transformation appears to be triggered by stress, physical contact with the scarred tissue, or decisions involving moral ambiguity. The coin that once symbolized Harvey's faith in impartial justice undergoes its own transformation, becoming the primary tool through which his fractured psyche makes decisions. One side remains clean and unmarked, representing the prosecutor who still believes in law and order. The other side becomes scarred and blackened, matching the damaged half of his face and representing the criminal who has embraced the chaos that destroyed his former life. Two-Face's first appearance on Gotham's streets sends shockwaves through both the criminal underworld and law enforcement community that have nothing to do with his body count and everything to do with what his existence represents. This is not merely another costumed criminal pursuing wealth or power. This is the systematic dismantling of the moral framework that separates civilization from anarchy, conducted by a man who once served as the guardian of that very framework. His crimes follow a pattern that reflects his psychological duality with mathematical precision. Banks and armored cars are robbed on dates containing the number 2. Victims are selected based on binary criteria, married or single, young or old, innocent or guilty. Most disturbingly, he offers some of his victims a choice: heads they live, tails they die, the flip of his scarred coin, determining whether he acts as protector or destroyer. Batman's investigation into Two-Face's activities becomes a journey into the heart of moral complexity that challenges every assumption he has made about justice, punishment, and the possibility of redemption. The man he tracks through Gotham's shadows is not merely Harvey Dent corrupted, but Harvey Dent perfected, freed from the constraints of legal procedure and social expectation to pursue a purer form of justice that acknowledges the fundamental ambiguity inherent in all moral decisions. The confrontation between Batman and Two-Face takes place in the ruins of the Gotham courthouse, the same building where Harvey's transformation began, now half destroyed by an explosion that Two-Face claims was necessary to achieve perfect architectural symmetry. The symbolism is deliberate and devastating. The Temple of Justice reduced to rubble by the very man who once served as its high priest. Harvey. Batman's voice carries the weight of a man addressing a friend's ghost. I know you're still in there. The man who dedicated his life to justice doesn't just disappear. Two-Face's response emerges from both sides of his mouth, simultaneously the undamaged side, speaking with Harvey's familiar compassion, the scarred side rasping with Big Bad Harv's barely controlled violence. Justice? Justice is what got me into this mess, old friend. Maybe it's time to try a little injustice for a change. The battle that follows is less a physical confrontation than a philosophical debate conducted through violence and counter-violence. Batman represents the belief that moral complexity can be navigated through consistent principles and unwavering commitment to justice. Two-Face embodies the opposing view that moral complexity is so complete that the only honest response is to surrender all pretense of consistency and let chance determine the difference between right and wrong. But perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of their confrontation is the moment when Harvey's original personality surfaces, allowing Batman to glimpse the man his friend might have been if trauma had not fractured his psyche beyond repair. For an instant, Two-Face becomes Harvey Dent again, the idealistic prosecutor who believed that law and order could triumph over chaos and corruption through the simple application of truth and justice. Bruce, Harvey whispers, his voice carrying the weight of a man who has glimpsed his own damnation and found it wanting. Help me. I can feel myself disappearing, piece by piece, decision by decision. Soon there won't be anything left of the man I used to be. Batman's response, reaching out with one hand while keeping his other hand ready to deploy a grappling hook or batarang, perfectly encapsulates the tragedy of Harvey Dent's transformation. This is not a villain who can be defeated through superior firepower or tactical advantage, but a victim who can only be saved through the kind of compassion that Batman struggles to express even to himself. The resolution, when it comes, satisfies neither legal justice nor poetic justice, but serves something more important: the recognition that some forms of madness are so complete that the only mercy is containment rather than cure. Two-Face's capture represents not victory, but stalemate, a temporary cessation of hostilities in a war that will continue as long as Harvey Dent's fractured psyche maintains its precarious balance between order and chaos. As he is led away to Arkham Asylum, straight-jacketed and sedated but still clutching his scarred coin like a rosary, Two-Face leaves behind more than just crime scenes and trauma. He leaves behind the question that will haunt Batman for the rest of his crusade. If someone as fundamentally good as Harvey Dent can be transformed into something monstrous by a single moment of trauma, what does that say about the stability of heroism itself? In the depths of Arkham, Two-Face settles into his cell with the resignation of a man who has discovered that there are some forms of justice that even justice cannot heal. The walls are covered with his artwork sketches that divide the world into neat binary categories, charts that attempt to quantify the moral weight of every possible human action. And in the center of it all, mounted on the wall like a religious icon, is a photograph of Harvey Dent in his prime, a reminder of what he was and what he can never be again. The tragedy of Two-Face is not that he became evil, but that he became the perfect embodiment of moral ambiguity in a world that demands clear distinctions between right and wrong. His story serves as a warning that heroism and villainy are not fixed categories but fluid states, and that the line between justice and vengeance is as thin as the edge of a coin spinning through the air, waiting for chance to determine which side will face the light. In the hierarchy of Gotham's monsters, none represents the complete dissolution of human identity quite like the creature that was once Matt Hagen, a man whose transformation from celebrated actor to shape-shifting nightmare serves as a cautionary tale about the price of vanity and the corporate machinery that feeds on human desperation. The story begins not in the shadowy laboratories where mad science creates monsters, but under the blazing lights of Hollywood, where a different kind of alchemy transforms ordinary people into gods and goddesses of the silver screen. Matt Hagen stands at the pinnacle of his profession, a leading man whose rugged features and commanding presence have made him the face of masculine heroism for an entire generation of moviegoers. His roles as action heroes and romantic leads have earned him not just fame and fortune, but something far more intoxicating: the adoration of millions, who see in him the embodiment of their deepest fantasies about strength, courage, and physical perfection. But time, as it always does, begins to exact its price on the commodity that is Matt Hagen's face. The first lines appear around his eyes like hairline fractures in marble, barely visible to most observers but glaring as searchlights to a man whose entire identity is built on the foundation of physical beauty. The slight softening of his jawline, the barely perceptible thinning of his hair, the almost imperceptible changes that mark the transition from youth to middle age. These become sources of existential terror for a man who has never learned to value anything about himself that cannot be captured by a camera. The meetings with casting directors become exercises in systematic humiliation, as Matt watches younger, hungrier actors claim the roles that once would have been his without question. The mirror in his Hollywood Hills mansion transforms from ally to enemy, reflecting back an image that falls short of the impossible standard he has internalized after decades of being paid to be perfect. The telephone calls from his agent become less frequent, the scripts offered to him less prestigious, the roles available to him increasingly relegated to character parts that acknowledge his advancing age rather than celebrating his eternal youth. Dr. Roland Daggett represents everything toxic about the intersection of science and commerce, a man whose medical degree serves primarily to provide legitimacy for enterprises that exist in the gray areas between healing and exploitation. His company, Daggett Pharmaceuticals, operates under the banner of improving human life through chemical innovation, but its actual business model depends on identifying human vulnerabilities and creating products that promise to address those vulnerabilities while actually deepening them. The experimental compound that Daggett offers to Matt Hagen carries the clinical designation RX-2475. But the street name among the Hollywood elite who serve as Daggett's test subjects is far more seductive. Renew You. The cream promises to restore not just youthful appearance, but the actual cellular structure of skin, turning back the biological clock through the application of advanced polymer chemistry. For a man like Matt, whose entire sense of self-worth depends on maintaining an impossible standard of physical perfection, Renew You represents nothing less than salvation. The initial treatments produce results that exceed even Matt's desperate hopes. The lines around his eyes disappear, as if erased by divine intervention. His skin regains the taut elasticity of youth, glowing with the health and vitality that had made him a star. Casting directors who had dismissed him as over the hill suddenly rediscover his potential for leading roles. The mirror becomes an ally again, reflecting back the face that has been his fortune and his identity for so many years. But Renew You, like all of Daggett's innovations, is designed not to solve problems but to create dependencies. The compound's effects are temporary, requiring increasingly frequent applications to maintain their benefits. More insidiously, prolonged use begins to alter the fundamental structure of human tissue in ways that Daggett's research has carefully hidden from both his test subjects and regulatory authorities. The skin becomes addicted to the chemical enhancement, losing its ability to maintain normal cellular function without constant chemical support. Matt's decline begins subtly. Missed applications result in rapid aging that goes far beyond the natural process he had originally sought to halt. His skin becomes loose and malleable, taking on a clay-like consistency that can be shaped and reshaped with disturbing ease. What had begun as a treatment for vanity evolves into a medical necessity, as his body becomes dependent on chemical intervention just to maintain basic human appearance. The final transformation occurs not through accident, but through deliberate malice, as Daggett decides that Matt's growing dependence makes him useful for purposes beyond simple product testing. The industrial-strength dose of Renew You that Daggett's associates force into Matt's bloodstream represents the complete weaponization of his vanity, turning his desire for physical perfection into the instrument of his destruction. The creature that emerges from this chemical baptism retains Matt Hagen's memories and personality, but exists in a body that has been reduced to its most basic molecular components. Clayface, as he comes to be known, can reshape his physical form at will, adopting any appearance his mind can conceive and his malleable flesh can approximate. He becomes the ultimate actor, capable of perfect impersonation, not through skill and artifice, but through literal transformation into his chosen roles. But the gift of infinite physical possibility comes at the cost of fixed identity. Without a stable physical form, Matt begins to lose his sense of self, becoming increasingly uncertain about which face represents his true appearance and which are merely performances. The mirror that had once been enemy and ally becomes meaningless, reflecting back only whatever shape he happens to be wearing at any given moment. Batman's investigation into the Clayface phenomena represents one of his most challenging cases, not because of the physical threat posed by a shape-shifting opponent, but because of the scientific impossibility of Matt's transformation. Traditional forensic techniques become useless when dealing with a suspect who can alter his cellular structure at will, leaving behind DNA evidence that changes from sample to sample and fingerprints that exist only until he chooses to reshape his hands. The detective work that eventually leads Batman to Daggett Pharmaceuticals follows a trail of corporate malfeasance rather than criminal evidence, connecting Matt's transformation to a larger pattern of human experimentation that treats desperate people as raw material for profitable innovation. The files Batman uncovers in Daggett's private laboratory reveal the true scope of the company's crimes, not just the creation of Clayface, but the systematic exploitation of human vulnerability in service of scientific curiosity and commercial gain. The confrontation between Batman and Clayface takes place in the abandoned television studio, where Matt once filmed his most famous roles, a location chosen for its symbolic significance rather than tactical advantage. The soundstage has been transformed into a house of mirrors, with Clayface using his shape-shifting abilities to create multiple versions of himself, each one representing a different aspect of his fractured identity. Which one is the real Matt Hagen? Clayface asks, his voice emerging from a dozen different throats as he cycles through his various forms. The young leading man, the aging character actor, the desperate junkie? Or maybe this is who I really am, a man made of clay, with no fixed shape and no fixed soul. Batman's response comes not through superior firepower or tactical advantage, but through something Clayface cannot imitate or approximate: genuine compassion for the man trapped within the monster. You're all of them, Matt. The whole person, not just the parts you're proud of or the parts you want to hide. The battle that follows is less a physical confrontation than a psychological intervention, with Batman attempting to reach the core personality that still exists somewhere within Clayface's malleable form. Each of his attacks is calculated not to defeat his opponent, but to force him to maintain a consistent shape long enough for genuine communication to occur. But perhaps the most tragic aspect of their confrontation is the realization that Matt's transformation may be irreversible, not because of the chemical changes to his body, but because of the psychological damage caused by decades of defining himself solely through external appearance. Even if his physical form could be stabilized, the man who emerges would still be someone who has never learned to value anything about himself that cannot be seen in a mirror. The resolution of the Clayface case comes not through victory but through acceptance, the recognition that some forms of transformation are so complete that the only meaningful choice is how to live with the consequences. Matt's decision to use his abilities to protect rather than prey upon the innocent represents not redemption but evolution, the development of a moral framework that can exist independently of physical form. As Clayface disappears into the Gotham night, his body flowing like liquid between the shadows, he leaves behind more than just crime scenes and property damage. He leaves behind questions about the nature of identity itself, whether we are defined by our physical forms, our actions, our memories, or something deeper that persists through even the most radical transformation. In the depths of the sewers beneath Gotham, where Clayface makes his home among the other outcasts and monsters, he continues his existence as a creature caught between humanity and monstrosity. His reflection, glimpsed occasionally in the surface of underground pools, shows not the handsome leading man he once was, or the perfect actor he dreamed of becoming, but something new, a being whose identity exists not in any single form, but in the choice to use his abilities in service of something greater than himself. The tragedy of Clayface is not that he lost his humanity, but that he discovered it too late, learned to value the substance of character only after losing the form that had defined him for so long. His story serves as a warning about the dangers of vanity and the corporate forces that profit from human insecurity, but also as a testament to the possibility that identity can survive even the most complete physical transformation. Matt Hagen's legacy lives on, not in the films that made him famous or the face that made him a star, but in the choices he makes as Clayface, the decision to be a protector rather than a predator, a guardian rather than a monster. In Gotham City, where transformation is often synonymous with corruption, he represents the possibility that change can lead not to damnation, but to a deeper understanding of what it truly means to be human. In the shadows of Gotham's moral landscape, where heroism and villainy blur into shades of gray that resist easy categorization, two women move with the grace of predators and the complexity of anti-heroes who refuse to be confined by traditional concepts of good and evil. They are creatures of the night who have chosen different paths toward the same destination, a world where the powerful can no longer prey upon the vulnerable with impunity. Selina Kyle stands on the edge of a Gotham rooftop, her lithe form silhouetted against the amber glow of streetlights that pierce the perpetual twilight like fallen stars. The leather costume that has become her second skin moves with her breathing, every line and curve calculated to intimidate, seduce, and mislead in equal measure. She is Catwoman, a name that speaks to the duality of her nature, the domesticated predator who can purr with contentment or strike with lethal precision, depending on the circumstances and her mood. Her origin story reads like a film noir screenplay written by someone who understands that the most dangerous criminals are often created by the very society they eventually prey upon. Selina's transformation from corporate secretary to master thief follows the trajectory of a woman who discovered that playing by the rules only ensures that those who write the rules will always win. The sexual harassment, the glass ceiling, the systematic exclusion from power structures that she once naively believed were based on merit rather than gender. These experiences taught her that legitimate channels for advancement are often closed to those who lack the proper credentials of birth, gender, or class. But Catwoman is more than just another criminal seeking easy money or social revenge. Her heists are carefully chosen acts of redistribution, targeting wealthy collectors who have acquired their treasures through exploitation, corporations that profit from environmental destruction, and individuals whose wealth is built on foundations of human suffering. She steals not just for personal gain, but as a form of economic justice that operates outside the boundaries of legal systems designed to protect accumulated wealth rather than challenge its origins. The cat persona that defines her public identity serves multiple functions beyond simple intimidation or trademark branding. Cats are creatures that exist simultaneously in the domestic and wild realms, capable of showing affection while maintaining complete independence, offering comfort while never surrendering their essential predatory nature. Selina has internalized these contradictions, becoming someone who can work alongside Batman while maintaining her own moral framework, who can show genuine compassion while never allowing that compassion to compromise her survival instincts. Her relationship with Batman represents one of the most complex dynamics in Gotham's superhero mythology, not the clear opposition of hero versus villain, but something far more nuanced and therefore more dangerous to both participants. Bruce Wayne recognizes in Selina Kyle a reflection of what he might have become if his trauma had led him toward crime rather than justice, while Catwoman sees in Batman a man whose rigid moral code both attracts and frustrates her in equal measure. Their rooftop encounters carry an erotic tension that has nothing to do with sexual attraction and everything to do with the recognition that they are perfectly matched opponents who choose not to destroy each other, despite having the capability to do so. When they fight, it is with the precision of dancers who have rehearsed their movements to the point where violence becomes a form of communication, each strike and counter-strike conveying messages that neither could express through words alone. "You know I have to stop you," Batman says during one of their encounters, his voice carrying the weight of a man who wishes he could choose differently. "And you know I won't let you," Catwoman purrs in response, her whip coiling and uncoiling with hypnotic rhythm. That's what makes this interesting. But if Catwoman represents the seductive complexity of moral ambiguity, then Dr. Pamela Isley embodies something far more dangerous, the righteous fury of nature itself, transformed into human form and equipped with both scientific knowledge and supernatural abilities that make her capable of reshaping the world according to her vision of ecological justice. Poison Ivy's origin story reads like an environmental parable written in blood and chlorophyll, documenting the transformation of a brilliant botanist into something that exists at the intersection of human consciousness and plant biology. Dr. Isley's research into plant toxins and their potential medical applications represents the kind of groundbreaking work that could revolutionize human healthcare if it were allowed to proceed according to scientific, rather than commercial priorities. But Pamela's transformation into Poison Ivy occurs not through accident, but through deliberate betrayal, as corporate interests decide that her research is more valuable than her life. The attempt to murder her through exposure to her own experimental toxins fails in the most spectacular way possible, creating instead a being whose metabolism has been fundamentally altered to incorporate the biochemical processes of the plant kingdom. Poison Ivy emerges from this chemical baptism as something unprecedented in human evolution, a creature who can photosynthesize sunlight into energy, who can control plant growth through pheromone manipulation, who can produce toxins that range from mildly hallucinogenic to instantly lethal depending on her intentions and her mood. More importantly, she develops a psychic connection to plant life that allows her to perceive the worldwide destruction of natural ecosystems as a form of personal torture. Her crimes follow a pattern that reflects her environmental priorities with mathematical precision. Corporate executives who authorize deforestation projects die from exotic plant toxins that leave behind no trace in standard autopsy procedures. Industrial facilities that pollute waterways find themselves overrun by aggressive plant growth that destroys equipment and drives away workers. Politicians who accept bribes from anti-environmental lobbies discover that their carefully manicured gardens have been transformed into carnivorous jungles that make their homes uninhabitable. But perhaps most disturbing from law enforcement's perspective is Ivy's ability to seduce and control human beings through the same pheromone manipulation that allows her to communicate with plants. Her victims, invariably men who hold positions of power in environmentally destructive industries, fall under her influence, with no apparent awareness that their sudden change in behavior is being externally controlled. The partnership between Catwoman and Poison Ivy represents one of the most formidable criminal alliances in Gotham's history, combining Selina's tactical expertise and Pamela's scientific abilities in service of goals that neither could accomplish alone. Their team-ups target the intersection of corporate greed and environmental destruction, focusing on companies that profit from activities that damage both human communities and natural ecosystems. Their first major collaboration involves the systematic dismantling of a pharmaceutical company that has been testing experimental drugs on homeless populations, while simultaneously destroying wetlands that serve as habitats for endangered species. The operation unfolds with the precision of a military campaign, combining Catwoman's infiltration skills with Poison Ivy's ability to turn the company's own security systems against its employees. Money can't buy you love. Ivy purrs as she watches the company's executives flee from their office building, which has been transformed into a greenhouse where every plant is designed to induce terror rather than tranquility. But it can certainly rent you a very expensive funeral. Batman's investigation into their criminal partnership forces him to confront uncomfortable questions about the relationship between legal justice and moral justice, between the protection of property rights and the preservation of human life. The companies that Catwoman and Poison Ivy target are technically legal enterprises operating within the boundaries of laws that have been carefully crafted to permit exactly the kind of exploitation that the two women seek to prevent. The detective work that leads Batman to their hideout follows a trail of corporate connections rather than traditional criminal evidence, mapping the network of relationships that allows environmental destruction to proceed under the protection of legal immunity. The files he uncovers reveal the true scope of the problem, not just individual companies pursuing profit at the expense of environmental safety, but an entire economic system that treats natural resources as disposable commodities and human communities as acceptable casualties of industrial progress. The confrontation between Batman and the two women takes place in Robinson Park, where Poison Ivy has used her abilities to create a temporary Eden that showcases what Gotham could look like if human development were guided by ecological principles rather than pure economic calculation. Ancient trees tower overhead, their branches forming a canopy that filters moonlight into patterns of silver and shadow. Exotic flowers bloom in impossible colors, their fragrances combining to create an atmosphere that seems to exist outside normal space and time. "This is what we're fighting for," Ivy says, her green skin glowing with bioluminescence as she moves between plants that respond to her presence like pets greeting their owner. A world where life is valued more than profit, where beauty is preserved rather than destroyed for temporary convenience. Catwoman moves through this garden paradise with the grace of a predator in its natural habitat, her costume seeming to shift color and texture to match her surroundings. The question, Batman, is what you're fighting for. The status quo that allows this destruction to continue, or something better? Batman's response comes not through superior firepower or tactical advantage, but through something that both women recognize and respect: a genuine commitment to justice that transcends the narrow boundaries of legal procedure. "I'm fighting for the possibility that we can change things without destroying everything in the process." The battle that follows is less a physical confrontation than a philosophical debate conducted through the medium of carefully choreographed violence. Batman represents the belief that systematic change can occur through reform of existing institutions, while Catwoman and Poison Ivy embody the opposing view that some forms of injustice can only be addressed through direct action that operates outside legal boundaries. But perhaps the most significant aspect of their encounter is the recognition that they are not truly enemies but allies, working toward the same goals through different methods. The resolution comes not through defeat but through accommodation, an understanding that Gotham's problems are complex enough to require multiple approaches, some operating within the system, and others challenging it from the outside. As dawn breaks over Robinson Park, transforming Ivy's temporary paradise into something that must be carefully concealed from the authorities who would destroy it if they understood its significance, the three figures stand in an uneasy truce that acknowledges their fundamental compatibility, despite their tactical differences. Catwoman and Poison Ivy disappear into the urban jungle that is their natural habitat, leaving behind more than just property damage and corporate losses. They leave behind questions about the nature of justice itself, whether true reform can occur through legal channels or requires the kind of direct action that challenges the fundamental assumptions of a system designed to protect accumulated wealth and power, rather than promote genuine equality. In the months that follow, their influence can be detected in dozens of incidents that never make the newspapers. Corporate executives who suddenly develop environmental consciences, industrial facilities that experience mysterious equipment, failures that happen to coincide with the discovery of pollution violations, political campaigns that find their funding mysteriously redirected toward environmental protection initiatives. The legacy of their partnership extends beyond their individual crimes to encompass a broader challenge to the assumptions that underlie Gotham's social and economic order. They represent the possibility that feminine power, when properly organized and intelligently applied, can challenge masculine institutions that have traditionally operated without accountability or oversight. Catwoman and Poison Ivy serve as reminders that heroism and villainy are not fixed categories, but fluid states that depend more on perspective than on action. In a city where the line between justice and vigilantism has been blurred beyond recognition, they offer alternative models for resistance that acknowledge the complexity of moral choice while never abandoning the commitment to fight for a better world. Their story becomes part of Gotham's larger mythology about the possibility of transformation, not just the corruption of innocence into evil, but the evolution of victimhood into agency, of powerlessness into strength, and of submission into rebellion. They are the Sisters of the Night, creatures who have chosen to embrace their monstrous aspects in service of goals that transcend their individual desires for revenge or personal satisfaction. In the mythology of Gotham, where darkness breeds legend and tragedy transforms ordinary people into symbols that transcend their human origins, no story cuts deeper into the heart of heroism's true cost than that of Dick Grayson, a boy who lost everything in a single moment of calculated cruelty, only to discover that loss can be transformed into purpose when guided by the right mentor and tempered by the right choices. The Flying Graysons represent something increasingly rare in Gotham's poisoned landscape, a family unit that functions according to principles of love, trust, and mutual support rather than the dynamics of fear, manipulation, and survival that characterize most of the city's social relationships. John and Mary Grayson move through the air 40 feet above the circus ring with the grace of dancers whose partnership has transcended the physical realm to become something approaching spiritual communion. Their 9-year-old son Dick watches from the platform, his young eyes bright with the anticipation of joining them in their aerial ballet, once he masters the final elements of their family's acrobatic legacy. Haley's Circus exists as a pocket of wonder in a world that has largely abandoned the possibility of innocent entertainment. Under the big top, surrounded by the laughter of children and the gasps of amazed adults, it becomes possible to believe that human beings are capable of transcending their limitations through dedication, practice, and the kind of trust that allows one person to literally place their life in another's hands. The circus represents everything that Gotham has lost: community, tradition, the celebration of human potential rather than human failure. But even in this sanctuary of joy and wonder, the corruption that defines Gotham's essential character finds ways to intrude. Tony Zuko operates according to the same principles that govern all of the city's criminal enterprises: violence as a tool for enforcing compliance, fear as a method for maintaining control, and the systematic destruction of anything that refuses to submit to his particular vision of how the world should operate. The protection racket that Zuko operates represents a particularly insidious form of parasitism, one that targets not the wealthy or the corrupt, but the innocent and the vulnerable. Small business owners, traveling performers, independent operators who lack the resources to hire private security or buy political protection. These become his prey, forced to choose between surrendering their profits to his organization or facing the consequences of resistance. "You people make me sick," Zuko tells Mr. Haley, his voice carrying the casual contempt of a man who views kindness as weakness and joy as a form of moral deficiency. "All this happy family nonsense, all these smiling kids and grateful parents, don't you understand that life is about taking what you can get before someone else takes it from you?" Mr. Haley's refusal to pay protection money stems not from financial inability, but from moral principle, the recognition that surrendering to extortion represents a form of spiritual death that would poison everything the circus stands. 4. "We've never hurt anyone," he tells Zuko, with the quiet dignity of a man who has spent his life bringing happiness to others. "We just want to entertain people, to give families a chance to spend time together doing something beautiful." "Beautiful?" Zuko's laugh carries the sound of breaking glass. "I'll show you something beautiful." The sabotage of the Flying Grayson's performance represents more than just murder, disguised as accident. It is the deliberate destruction of innocence itself, the calculated elimination of everything that makes life worth living, in service of a message that no one can escape the reach of Gotham's criminal ecosystem. The ropes that support John and Mary Grayson during their final performance have been weakened with acid, timed to fail at the moment of their most complex maneuver, when their son would be watching from the platform and hundreds of witnesses would be present to spread the story of what happens to those who defy Tony Zuko's authority. Dick Grayson's perspective from the platform allows him to see everything the moment when his parents realize that their ropes are failing, the desperate attempt to reach for safety that comes a split second too late, the 40-foot fall that transforms the center ring from a stage for wonder into a scene of unspeakable tragedy. But perhaps most traumatic is the sound, not just the impact of bodies hitting sawdust, but the silence that follows, the absolute absence of the laughter and applause that had always greeted the Flying Grayson's performances. The boy who climbs down from the platform is no longer the same child who had ascended it moments before. Dick Grayson's transformation begins not with the adoption of a costume or the learning of fighting techniques, but with the recognition that the world is not a safe place, that evil exists and sometimes triumphs, and that the authorities who are supposed to protect the innocent are often powerless to prevent tragedy or bring justice to those responsible for causing it. Bruce Wayne's presence at the circus that night represents one of those strange convergences of fate that seem to characterize Gotham's mythic landscape with unusual frequency. His attendance at the performance stems not from any particular interest in circus arts, but from a social obligation, another wealthy patron showing support for one of the city's few remaining sources of family entertainment. But the moment he witnesses the death of the Flying Graysons, Bruce recognizes something that connects directly to his own traumatic origin story. The conversation between Bruce and Dick that takes place in the police station afterward carries the weight of one trauma survivor recognizing another. Dick sits wrapped in a blanket, his circus costume still bright with sequins that catch fluorescent light and transform it into something resembling fallen stars, his young face reflecting the kind of shock that comes from discovering that the universe is not arranged according to principles of justice or fairness. "I saw who did it," Dick whispers, his voice barely audible above the ambient noise of police procedures and bureaucratic processing. "I saw the man who weakened the ropes. But when I told the detectives, they said there wasn't enough evidence to make an arrest." Bruce kneels beside the boy's chair, recognizing in Dick's expression the same helpless rage that had consumed him in the aftermath of his parents' murder. "What's your name, son?" "Dick Grayson. I was supposed to perform with them next week. Dad said I was finally ready for the triple somersault." His voice breaks on the last words, carrying the weight of dreams that will never be fulfilled and skills that will never be shared with the people who taught them to him. "Dick, I want you to know that you're not alone. I lost my parents too when I was about your age. I know what it feels like to want justice and to feel like the system has failed you." The adoption process that brings Dick Grayson into Wayne Manor represents more than just legal guardianship. It is the beginning of a mentoring relationship that will fundamentally reshape both participants. Bruce sees in Dick the possibility of preventing another child from being consumed by the kind of rage and obsession that has defined his own response to trauma. Dick sees in Bruce not just a benefactor, but someone who understands the specific type of pain that comes from losing family to criminal violence. Alfred's role in Dick's integration into the Wayne household cannot be overstated. The butler, who has spent decades managing Bruce's transformation into Batman, recognizes immediately that Dick represents both an opportunity and a danger. The possibility of healing some of the psychological damage that is made Bruce's mission so isolating, but also the risk of exposing another child to the kind of violence and moral complexity that characterizes life as a crime fighter. Master Bruce, Alfred says during one of their private conversations in the weeks following Dick's arrival, the boy needs stability, normalcy, the chance to grieve properly, and rebuild his life. I'm not certain that introducing him to your nocturnal activities would serve his best interests. I'm not planning to make him into another Batman, Bruce replies, though the uncertainty in his voice suggests that he hasn't fully worked through his own motivations for taking Dick into his home. But I can teach him to protect himself, to channel his anger into something constructive rather than destructive. The training that begins in Wayne Manor's private gymnasium represents a compromise between Bruce's desire to prepare Dick for the realities of life in Gotham and Alfred's insistence that the boy be allowed to maintain some semblance of normal childhood development. Dick's natural athleticism, honed by years of circus training, provides a foundation for martial arts instruction that progresses with remarkable speed. But more importantly, the physical training serves as a form of therapy, allowing Dick to work through his grief and rage in ways that strengthen rather than consume him. The transformation of Dick Grayson into Robin occurs not through a single moment of revelation, but through a gradual process of preparation and education. Bruce introduces him to the concept of Batman not as a recruitment pitch, but as an explanation for the strange hours, the unexplained injuries, the sophisticated equipment that fills the cave beneath Wayne Manor. Dick's acceptance of Bruce's double identity comes with the immediate understanding that he wants to be part of the mission not as a subordinate but as a partner. I want to help you stop people like the one who killed my parents, Dick tells Bruce with the absolute certainty that only children can muster when they believe they have discovered their life's purpose. I want to make sure that no other families have to go through what mine went through. The costume that emerges from their collaboration reflects Dick's personality and background rather than simply creating a miniature version of Batman's intimidating presence. The bright colors serve multiple tactical functions. They draw enemy attention away from Batman's position while providing high visibility for rescue operations. More importantly, they represent hope and joy in a partnership that might otherwise be consumed by the darkness that has defined Bruce's solitary crusade. Robin's first appearance on Gotham's streets sends ripples through both the criminal underworld and law enforcement community that have nothing to do with his combat effectiveness and everything to do with what his existence represents. This is proof that Batman's mission is not just about vengeance but about justice, not just about punishment but about protection, not just about ending criminal careers but about preventing future victims. The investigation into Tony Zuko's criminal operations becomes Robin's first real test as a crime fighter, combining his personal stake in the outcome with the need to operate according to Batman's strict moral code. The detective work leads them through layers of corruption that extend far beyond simple extortion, revealing connections to drug trafficking, political bribery, and the systematic intimidation of anyone who might serve as a witness against Zuko's organization. Dick's insider knowledge of circus culture provides crucial insights that allow Batman to penetrate Zuko's network in ways that would have been impossible through conventional investigation. The traveling nature of circus life creates opportunities for criminal organizations to transport contraband across state lines while maintaining the appearance of legitimate entertainment enterprises. Zuko has been using this cover for years, building a criminal empire that spans multiple cities while hiding behind the innocent facade of family entertainment. The confrontation between Robin and Tony Zuko takes place on the rooftop of the same warehouse, where Zuko has been storing the equipment stolen from circuses that refuse to pay his protection money. The symbolism is deliberate and personal. Dick facing the man who destroyed his family, while surrounded by the tools and costumes that represent everything he has lost. "You killed my parents," Dick says, his voice carrying the controlled fury of someone who has learned to channel rage into purpose rather than allowing it to consume him. "You took away everything I cared about because they wouldn't give you money they didn't have." Zuko's response reveals the fundamental inability of certain types of criminals to understand the concept of moral responsibility. "Kid, your parents killed themselves the moment they decided to cross me. I just helped them along a little." The battle that follows is less about physical combat than about the choice between justice and revenge, between heroism and vigilantism. Robin possesses both the skill and the opportunity to kill Zuko, to end his threat permanently and satisfy the demands of personal vengeance. But the decision he makes in that moment defines not just his own character, but the fundamental nature of his partnership with Batman. "You're going to jail," Robin tells Zuko as he uses his grappling line to secure the criminal for police custody. "You're going to face trial, and you're going to spend the rest of your life paying for what you've done. But you're not going to die, because that would make me no better than you." Batman's presence during this confrontation serves not as backup, but as witness confirmation that Dick has internalized the moral framework that separates heroism from mere violence. The boy who began this journey consumed by grief and rage has evolved into someone capable of choosing justice over revenge, even when faced with the man who destroyed his family. The resolution of the Zuko case represents more than just successful law enforcement. It marks Dick's full integration into the mythic landscape of Gotham as something new and unprecedented in the city's criminal history. Robin becomes proof that Batman's influence can create heroes rather than just eliminate villains, that the mission can grow beyond its origins in personal trauma to encompass genuine hope for the future. The partnership between Batman and Robin transforms both participants in ways that neither could have anticipated. Bruce discovers that sharing his burden with someone who understands its weight makes the mission sustainable in ways that solitary obsession could never achieve. Dick learns that grief can be transformed into purpose, that loss can become the foundation for protecting others from similar tragedy. Their dynamic adds a new dimension to Gotham's mythic landscape. The possibility that darkness can be balanced by light, that vengeance can evolve into justice, that the next generation can learn from the mistakes and traumas of their predecessors without being condemned to repeat them. Robin represents hope made manifest, the promise that heroism can be taught and that legacy can transcend the circumstances of its origin. As they stand together on a Gotham rooftop, cape and costume silhouetted against the eternal night sky, Batman and Robin embody the evolution of the city's superhero mythology from solo crusade to collaborative mission. Dick's presence serves as a reminder that even in Gotham's poisoned landscape, it is possible to nurture rather than corrupt, to heal rather than wound, to create rather than simply destroy. The boy who lost everything in a moment of calculated cruelty has become something that his parents would recognize and approve. Not a copy of their legacy, but an evolution of it. Someone who uses the skills they taught him and the love they gave him in service of a mission that honors their memory while protecting others from sharing their fate. In the sterile corridors of Arkham Asylum, where madness is studied with the dispassionate precision of laboratory science, and sanity is a luxury few inmates can afford, Dr. HARLEQUIN'S represents everything the institution was originally designed to embody: compassion, professionalism, and the unwavering belief that even the most damaged human psyches can be healed through proper treatment and genuine understanding. The woman who walks through Arkham's maximum security wing carries herself with the confident bearing of someone who has never doubted her ability to help others, whose entire identity is built on the foundation of healing rather than harming. Her doctorate in psychology from Gotham University represents years of rigorous study focused on the intersection of trauma and criminal behavior, while her residency at the city's most prestigious psychiatric hospital has given her practical experience in dealing with patients whose mental illness manifests in socially destructive ways. But Dr. Quinzel's true qualification for working at Arkham lies not in her academic credentials, but in her fundamental empathy, an almost supernatural ability to see through criminal behavior to the pain and confusion that drives it. Where other staff members see irredeemable monsters, She perceives damaged human beings whose actions stem from treatable psychological conditions. Where colleagues recommend permanent incarceration or pharmaceutical suppression, she advocates for therapy, understanding, and the kind of patient rehabilitation that believes in the possibility of genuine redemption. Her first encounter with the Joker occurs during what should have been a routine psychological evaluation, part of the ongoing assessment process that Arkham uses to monitor the mental state of its most dangerous patients. The man who sits across from her in the heavily secured interview room appears to be nothing more than another broken individual whose mind has been shattered by trauma and circumstance. Pale, thin, wearing the kind of institutional clothing that strips away all individuality and reduces human beings to their most basic components. "Tell me about your childhood, Dr. Quinzel begins, her voice carrying the professional warmth that has made her successful with even the most resistant patients. "I'd like to understand what experiences shaped your current worldview." The Joker's response emerges as a sound that might be laughter or might be sobbing. It becomes impossible to distinguish between the two, as his voice rises and falls in patterns that suggest both humor and profound sadness. "Oh, doctor, you want to know about my childhood? Which one would you prefer? The one where I was a failed comedian who turned to crime to support my pregnant wife? Or the one where I was a chemical engineer who fell into a vat of industrial waste while trying to escape Batman? Or maybe you'd like the version where I was just an ordinary guy who had one really bad day that changed everything?" Dr. Quinzel makes notes with the meticulous care of someone who believes that every detail might provide the key to understanding and ultimately healing her patient's fractured psyche. But she fails to recognize that the Joker's multiple origin stories are not symptoms of confused memory or psychological disorientation. They are weapons, carefully crafted tools designed to exploit her professional desire to find rational explanations for irrational behavior. The sessions that follow unfold with the inexorable logic of seduction. Though neither participant fully understands the nature of what is transpiring between them, Dr. Quinzel approaches each meeting with renewed determination to penetrate the Joker's psychological defenses and reach the traumatized human being she believes must exist beneath layers of madness and malice. The Joker responds with charm, vulnerability, and carefully orchestrated glimpses of what appears to be genuine remorse for his actions. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he tells her during their third session, his voice breaking with what sounds like authentic emotional pain. "The things I've done, the people I've hurt, it's like watching someone else commit terrible crimes while being trapped inside their body, unable to stop them or change their mind." These moments of apparent breakthrough become the foundation for Dr. Ober's Quinzel's growing conviction that the Joker can be saved, that his criminal behavior stems from treatable psychological trauma rather than inherent evil. She begins to see herself not just as his therapist, but as his potential savior, the one person with sufficient insight and compassion to guide him back to sanity and social functionality. But the Joker's manipulation extends beyond simple emotional exploitation to encompass a sophisticated understanding of psychological methodology itself. He has studied Dr. Quinzel's published papers, analyzed her therapeutic techniques, and identified the specific vulnerabilities in her professional approach that make her susceptible to his influence. Her empathy becomes a weapon he can use against her, her desire to help others transformed into a tool for his own purposes. The transformation of Dr. Harleen Quinzel into Harley Quinn occurs not through a single moment of dramatic revelation, but through a gradual process of psychological erosion that mirrors the most insidious forms of emotional abuse. The Joker's requests for special treatment begin small and seemingly reasonable additional session time to work through particularly difficult memories, permission to have writing materials so he can document his thoughts between meetings, access to books and educational materials that might help him understand his own condition. Each concession Dr. Quinzel makes represents another step away from professional boundaries and toward personal involvement that violates every principle of therapeutic practice. But the Joker frames these requests in terms of progress and healing, convincing her that his improvement depends on her willingness to go beyond conventional treatment approaches. "You're the only one who understands me, Doc," he tells her, with what appears to be genuine gratitude. "The other staff members just see a monster, but you see the person I used to be, the person I could be again with the right help. The security footage from their sessions, reviewed months later by investigators trying to understand how a respected psychiatrist could have been transformed into an accomplice to multiple homicides, reveals the subtle progression of Dr. Quinzel's corruption. Early recordings show her maintaining professional posture and emotional distance, taking notes and asking probing questions with the detached competence of a trained therapist. But as the sessions continue, her body language changes, leaning forward instead of sitting back, making eye contact for extended periods instead of focusing on her notepad, smiling and laughing at the Joker's jokes instead of analyzing them as symptoms of his psychological condition. Most tellingly, she begins to refer to him by the pet name Mr. J rather than his clinical designation, a shift that represents the complete collapse of professional boundaries. The night of her transformation into Harley Quinn begins with what Dr. Previer Quinzel believes is a therapeutic breakthrough, the Joker's apparent willingness to reveal the true story of his origin and accept responsibility for his crimes. She arrives at Arkham after hours, using her security clearance to access the maximum security wing for what she tells herself is an emergency session required by her patient's sudden psychological progress. Instead, she finds herself participating in the Joker's escape from Arkham, justified in her mind as a necessary step in his rehabilitation process. The man she helps break out of the most secure psychiatric facility in the country is no longer her patient, but her partner, someone whose madness she has not cured, but rather embraced as a form of superior insight into the fundamental absurdity of human existence. The costume she adopts during their first crime spree together represents the complete inversion of everything she once stood for, where Dr. Crime. Quinzel's professional attire had been designed to inspire confidence and convey competence. Harley Quinn's outfit speaks to chaos, unpredictability, and the deliberate rejection of social norms. The red and black color scheme mirrors the Joker's own aesthetic choices, while maintaining enough individuality to establish her as a partner rather than merely a subordinate. But perhaps the most significant aspect of her transformation is the voice, the adoption of a Brooklyn accent that has no connection to her actual background, but serves to distance her from her former identity as completely as possible. Harley Quinn speaks with the exaggerated cadences of someone performing a role rather than expressing authentic personality, creating yet another layer of psychological armor between her current self and the woman she used to be. Her first appearance on Gotham's streets as the Joker's partner in crime sends shockwaves through both law enforcement and the psychiatric community that have nothing to do with her criminal effectiveness and everything to do with what her transformation represents. This is not just another criminal recruited from Gotham's vast population of desperate and dangerous individuals. This is a respected professional who has voluntarily abandoned everything she once believed in to embrace madness as a lifestyle choice. Batman's investigation into Harley Quinn's background reveals layers of tragedy that challenge his understanding of criminal motivation and psychological manipulation. Dr. Quinzel's academic record shows a brilliant woman dedicated to helping others, while her professional history demonstrates genuine success in treating patients whom other therapists had written off as hopeless cases. Her transformation appears to represent not corruption through external pressure, but voluntary surrender to an alternative moral framework that values chaos over order, madness over sanity, destruction over healing. The confrontation between Batman and Harley Quinn takes place in the abandoned amusement park, where she and the Joker have established their headquarters, a location chosen for its symbolic representation of joy perverted into terror, innocent pleasure transformed into malicious entertainment. The funhouse mirrors that line the corridors reflect distorted images that seem to embody Harley's psychological state, familiar features rendered alien through the lens of madness. "You used to help people," Batman tells her, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understands the complexity of moral choice and psychological transformation. "You dedicated your life to healing minds that had been damaged by trauma and circumstance. What happened to that woman?" Harley's response emerges through laughter that carries no trace of humor, a sound that perfectly captures the intersection of joy and pain that defines her current existence. "That woman was a chump, Batsy. She thought she could fix people, thought she could make the world a better place through understanding and compassion. But Mr. J showed me the truth. The world doesn't want to be fixed. It wants to dance on the edge of the abyss and laugh at the beautiful meaninglessness of it all. The battle that follows is less a physical confrontation than a psychological intervention, with Batman attempting to reach whatever remnant of Dr. Quinn's might still exist beneath layers of adopted madness. Each exchange of blows becomes an opportunity for him to remind her of who she used to be, what she once valued, and the patients whose lives she had helped save through her professional dedication. But perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of their encounter is the recognition that Harley's transformation may represent not corruption, but evolution. The development of a coping mechanism so complete that removing it might destroy whatever remains of her original personality. The woman who became Harley Quinn may have done so not because she was weak, but because embracing madness was the only way to survive exposure to the Joker's particular form of psychological toxicity. The resolution comes not through victory, but through understanding the recognition that some forms of transformation are so complete that the only meaningful choice is how to live with the consequences. Harley's decision to maintain her partnership with the Joker while occasionally acting to protect innocent victims represents not redemption, but adaptation, the development of a moral framework that can exist within the parameters of madness. As she disappears into the Gotham night alongside the Joker, their laughter echoing off building walls like the sound of broken glass transformed into music, Harley Quinn leaves behind more than just crime scenes and trauma. She leaves behind questions about the nature of sanity itself, whether mental health is an objective condition or a social construct, whether madness is always pathological or sometimes adaptive, whether the choice between order and chaos is as clear as conventional morality suggests. In the depths of whatever hideout she and the Joker have chosen for their next criminal enterprise, Harley settles into her new existence with the satisfaction of someone who has found her true calling. The psychiatric textbooks that once defined her professional identity have been replaced with joke books and circus manuals. The case files that documented her success in treating damaged minds have been transformed into scrapbooks, celebrating her collaboration with Gotham's most dangerous criminal. But somewhere in the corner of her makeshift laboratory, barely visible among the chaos of criminal planning and psychological experimentation, is a small photograph of Dr. Harleen Quinzel in her graduation robes, a reminder of what she was and what she chose to become when faced with the ultimate choice between sanity and love, between professional ethics and personal loyalty, between the desire to heal and the need to be understood. The tragedy of Harley Quinn is not that she became evil, but that she became the perfect embodiment of love, perverted into something destructive yet somehow still recognizable as devotion. Her story serves as a warning about the dangers of losing professional boundaries while simultaneously acknowledging the human need for connection that makes such boundary violations possible in the first place. Dr. Harleen Quinzel's transformation into Harley Quinn represents the birth of a new archetype in Gotham's mythology, the professional who chooses madness over sanity, chaos over order, love over ethics. She becomes proof that even the most educated and compassionate individuals can be corrupted when exposed to the right combination of manipulation and genuine emotional need, but also evidence that such corruption might sometimes represent a form of adaptation rather than simple weakness. In Gotham City, where transformation is the only constant and identity is always provisional, Harley Quinn serves as both cautionary tale and celebration of the human capacity for reinvention. She reminds us that the line between sanity and madness is thinner than we might prefer to believe, and that love, even twisted, destructive love, remains one of the most powerful forces in human experience. In the sprawling mythology of Gotham City, where darkness seems to consume everything it touches and hope exists as a luxury few can afford, the true measure of heroism lies not in the solitary figure standing against the night, but in the network of relationships that sustain that figure when the weight of the mission threatens to crush even the strongest shoulders. Batman's war against crime succeeds not because of his individual brilliance or superior technology, but because of the allies who choose to stand with him despite understanding the costs such loyalty demands. Commissioner James Gordon represents the institutional conscience of Gotham City, a man whose unwavering commitment to justice operates within the constraints of law and bureaucracy, while maintaining the flexibility necessary to work. alongside a vigilante whose methods exist outside legal boundaries. His office on the top floor of police headquarters serves as both command center and sanctuary, a place where the official business of law enforcement intersects with the unofficial business of keeping Gotham's streets safe through whatever means prove necessary. The bat signal that pierces Gotham's perpetual twilight from the roof of police headquarters represents more than just a communication device. It is a symbol of cooperation between legitimate authority and vigilante justice, proof that even in a city as corrupt as Gotham, it remains possible for good people to find ways to work together despite fundamental differences in methodology and jurisdiction. When Gordon's weathered hand activates the signal, casting its iconic silhouette against storm clouds that seem to perpetually hover over the city, he is making a statement about the nature of justice itself, that it transcends institutional boundaries and legal procedures to become something approaching moral necessity. Their first meeting occurs on a rain-soaked rooftop, where Gordon waits with the patient resignation of a man who has learned that effective police work sometimes requires partnerships that exist outside official channels. The Batman who emerges from shadow and rain represents everything Gordon has been taught to oppose a vigilante who operates without oversight, accountability, or legal authority. Yet Gordon recognizes in him something that the official law enforcement system has failed to provide: results. You're operating outside the law. Gordon tells the dark figure who stands motionless at the edge of the rooftop, cape rippling in wind that carries the perpetual scent of rain and industrial decay. I should arrest you just for being here. But you won't, Batman replies, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who understands the moral complexity that defines Gordon's position. Because you know that following proper procedures has allowed criminals like the Falcones and Maronis to operate with impunity for decades. Because you've seen too many good cops destroyed by a system that protects corruption more effectively than it protects citizens. Gordon's response comes after a long pause, during which he weighs decades of police experience against the evidence of his own eyes. Crime rates dropping in areas where Batman operates, criminals surrendering rather than risking confrontation with the dark night, witnesses suddenly willing to testify against organized crime figures they had previously been too terrified to identify. What do you need from me? This question marks the beginning of a partnership that will redefine both men's understanding of justice and their roles in protecting a city that seems determined to destroy itself through corruption, violence, and moral indifference. Gordon provides Batman with access to police resources, crime scene information, and the institutional legitimacy that allows their collaboration to function within existing legal frameworks. Batman provides Gordon with the kind of direct action capabilities that official law enforcement cannot deploy due to constitutional restrictions and bureaucratic limitations. But perhaps more importantly, their partnership serves as mutual moral anchor for two men whose commitment to justice operates in environments that constantly test the boundaries of ethical behavior. Gordon's presence reminds Batman that his mission must serve larger principles than personal revenge, while Batman's success demonstrates to Gordon that effective justice sometimes requires actions that transcend legal procedure. Detective Harvey Bullock represents a different kind of ally, the skeptical professional whose distrust of Batman's methods gradually evolves into grudging respect based on observable results, rather than ideological agreement. Bullock's gruff exterior and cynical worldview mask a genuine commitment to protecting innocent people, though his methods favor conventional police work over the theatrical approaches that characterize Batman's crime-fighting techniques. I don't like vigilantes, Bullock tells Gordon during one of their private conversations in the precinct break room, gesturing toward newspaper headlines that document Batman's latest intervention in organized crime activities. They make us look bad, like we can't do our jobs without help from some freak in a costume. Maybe, Gordon replies, sipping coffee that has the consistency of motor oil and the taste of decades-old disappointment. But maybe looking bad is better than being ineffective. How many cases have we closed this month that we couldn't have solved without information Batman provided? Bullock's transformation from opponent to reluctant ally occurs gradually, through accumulated evidence that Batman's presence makes their job easier rather than more difficult. Crime scenes that would normally take weeks to process yield crucial evidence overnight. Witnesses who had been too frightened to cooperate suddenly provide detailed testimony about criminal activities they had observed. Most importantly, criminals who had previously operated with impunity begin making mistakes, born of paranoia and fear. The relationship between Batman and the broader law enforcement community represents one of the most complex dynamics in Gotham's social ecosystem. Younger officers tend to view Batman with excitement, bordering on hero worship, seeing him as the embodiment of justice unrestrained by bureaucratic limitations. Veteran detectives display more caution, recognizing that vigilante justice, however effective, represents a challenge to the rule of law that could have unpredictable long-term consequences. But it is in the civilian population that Batman's influence proves most significant, transforming not just crime rates, but the psychological landscape of a city that had learned to accept victimization as an inevitable aspect of urban life. The knowledge that someone is watching, that criminals cannot operate with complete impunity, that justice can strike from darkness without warning. These beliefs begin to restore something that Gotham had lost, the possibility that evil actions will face consequences. Alfred Pennyworth's role in sustaining Batman's mission cannot be overstated, though his contributions operate primarily behind the scenes where they receive no public recognition or official acknowledgement. The Wayne family butler serves simultaneously as technical support, medical treatment, psychological counselor, and moral compass for a man whose dedication to justice has isolated him from normal human relationships and conventional sources of emotional sustenance. The cave beneath Wayne Manor becomes, under Alfred's management, both command center and sanctuary, a place where the latest technology serves ancient purposes, where cutting-edge crime-fighting equipment coexists with reminders of family history and personal connection. Alfred's presence transforms what could have been a sterile underground facility into something approaching a home, albeit one designed to support activities that most homes would never need to accommodate. "Master Bruce," Alfred says during one of their evening conversations. Medical supplies spread across the cave's central table as he tends to injuries that Batman has accumulated during his latest encounter with Gotham's criminal element. "I sometimes wonder if your parents would approve of what their son has become." Bruce's response comes after careful consideration, his voice carrying the weight of a man who has spent years grappling with questions of legacy and moral responsibility. "They believed in justice, Alfred. They died because they encountered evil and had no protection against it. What I've become, it's what the world made necessary." The introduction of Robin into this support network represents a fundamental shift in Batman's operational philosophy, transforming his solitary crusade into something approaching a family enterprise. Dick Grayson's presence serves not just as tactical support but as emotional anchor, reminding Bruce that his mission must serve life-affirming purposes rather than simply satisfying desires for vengeance or control. Their partnership develops according to protocols that Alfred insists upon, training regimens that emphasize safety and judgment over pure combat effectiveness. Educational requirements that ensure Dick's intellectual development proceeds alongside his crime-fighting preparation, and strict limitations on the types of operations that permit Robin's participation. These constraints frustrate Dick's eagerness to contribute more directly to their mission, but they serve crucial functions in maintaining his psychological health and moral development. The relationship between Batman and Robin represents more than just tactical partnership. It embodies the possibility that heroism can be taught, that the next generation can learn from their predecessors' mistakes without being condemned to repeat them. Dick's presence forces Bruce to articulate principles that he had previously operated on through instinct, to develop teaching methods that can transmit not just skills but values. Barbara Gordon's evolution from commissioner's daughter to crime-fighting partner represents yet another dimension of Batman's expanding network of allies. Her transformation into Batgirl occurs not through trauma or tragedy, but through deliberate choice, the decision of an intelligent, capable young woman to use her abilities in service of justice, despite having other options for meaningful contribution to society. Her relationship with both Batman and Robin creates complex dynamics that reflect the changing nature of heroism in Gotham's mythology. Barbara brings perspectives and capabilities that neither of her male colleagues possesses, while her presence serves to normalize their activities in ways that make the entire enterprise seem less isolated from conventional social structures. The development of what becomes known as the Bat family represents the evolution of Batman's mission, from personal crusade to institutional legacy. Each new ally brings unique capabilities and perspectives, while contributing to a support network that makes the mission sustainable in ways that individual heroism could never achieve. The relationship between Batman and Zatanna introduces magical elements into what had been primarily a science-based crime-fighting operation. Her abilities force both Batman and his allies to expand their understanding of what is possible in a universe that operates according to rules far more complex than conventional physics would suggest. Their collaboration during the museum heist that brings them together demonstrates the potential for cooperation between different types of heroism. Batman's technological approach, combined with Zatanna's mystical capabilities, producing results that neither could achieve independently. But more importantly, their partnership serves as a reminder that effective justice requires diversity of methods and perspectives. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Zatanna tells Batman during one of their collaborative investigations, her voice carrying the weight of someone who has seen behind the veils that separate ordinary reality from deeper truths. Magic is just science that operates according to principles we don't yet understand. Batman's response reflects his characteristic preference for empirical evidence over theoretical speculation, but also his growing recognition that effective crime fighting requires flexibility in methodology and worldview. As long as it gets results and doesn't compromise innocent people, I don't care whether we call it science or magic. The introduction of the Grey Ghost into Batman's mythology represents the acknowledgement of influences and inspirations that shaped his approach to heroism, long before trauma transformed theoretical interest into practical necessity. The meeting between Batman and his childhood hero becomes an exercise in exploring the relationship between fictional heroism and real-world justice, between entertainment and moral inspiration. Their collaboration in stopping the Mad Bomber demonstrates how different generations of heroes can work together despite fundamental differences in their understanding of what heroism requires. The Grey Ghost's theatrical approach to crime fighting, developed during an era when clear distinctions between good and evil seemed more apparent, must adapt to contemporary realities that involve greater moral complexity and more sophisticated criminal organizations. "You learned from watching me," the Grey Ghost tells Batman as they work together to defuse explosives that threaten to destroy historical landmarks throughout Gotham. "But you became something I never could have imagined, someone who makes heroism real instead of just entertaining." Batman's response acknowledges the debt while recognizing the evolution that practical experience has imposed on theoretical inspiration. "You showed me that one person could make a difference. Everything else I had to figure out through trial and error." The network of allies that eventually surrounds Batman represents the institutionalization of heroism in ways that transcend individual capability or motivation. Commissioner Gordon provides legal legitimacy. Alfred offers logistical support. Robin contributes energy and hope. Batgirl brings fresh perspectives and capabilities, while characters like Zatanna and the Grey Ghost expand the operational parameters to include elements that conventional crime fighting cannot address. Together, they create something unprecedented in Gotham's history, a functioning system of justice that operates both within and outside official channels, that combines institutional authority with individual initiative, that balances legal procedure with moral necessity. The success of this network demonstrates that heroism, when properly supported and intelligently organized, can overcome even the most entrenched forms of corruption and evil. The legacy of these relationships extends beyond their immediate tactical contributions to encompass a broader transformation in Gotham's social and psychological landscape. The knowledge that good people are working together, that justice has both official and unofficial advocates, that evil actions will face consequences, regardless of their perpetrator's wealth or political connections. These beliefs begin to restore something that the city had lost: faith in the possibility that things can improve. In the end, Batman's greatest achievement lies not in any individual victory over crime or corruption, but in the creation of a community of allies dedicated to justice and willing to support each other through the inevitable challenges that such dedication entails. The Dark Knight's war against evil succeeds because it becomes more than one man's crusade. It evolves into a shared mission that can survive the limitations and failures of any individual participant. In the twisted architecture of Gotham's criminal landscape, no location represents the intersection of madness and malice, quite like Arkham Asylum, a fortress of stone and steel designed to contain the uncontainable, to treat the untreatable, and to study forms of human behavior that challenge every assumption about the nature of sanity, morality, and the possibility of redemption. Within its walls, the city's most dangerous criminals exist in a state of controlled chaos, their individual pathologies combining and interacting to create something approaching a hive mind of concentrated evil. Dr. Jonathan Crane embodies the perfect fusion of intellectual brilliance and psychological sadism, a man whose understanding of human fear has evolved from academic interest into practical application of terror as both weapon and art form. The scarecrow that he becomes represents something far more dangerous than simple physical threat. He is the embodiment of humanity's deepest anxieties, the nightmare made manifest through chemical innovation and psychological manipulation. His office at Gotham University, before his transformation into one of Arkham's most dangerous residents, reflected the mind of a scholar whose fascination with fear bordered on obsession. Books on phobias, anxiety disorders, and trauma psychology lined shelves that rose from floor to ceiling, while his desk displayed sophisticated chemical apparatus alongside academic journals documenting the latest research into neurotransmitter manipulation. But perhaps most telling were the photographs, images of test subjects experiencing various forms of terror, their faces captured at moments of pure psychological breakdown. Fear is the most honest emotion, Dr. Crane tells his graduate students during what will prove to be his final lecture before his criminal activities are discovered. Strip away all pretense, all social conditioning, all learned behavior, and fear reveals the animal nature that lurks beneath human civilization. Understanding fear means understanding what we really are beneath our masks of rationality and morality. The fear toxin that transforms Dr. Crane from respected academic into Arkham's most psychologically dangerous inmate represents the culmination of years of research into the chemical triggers that activate humanity's most primitive survival responses. The compound works not by creating new fears, but by amplifying existing anxieties to the point where rational thought becomes impossible, where the victim's own mind becomes their greatest enemy. Scarecrow's crimes follow a pattern that reflects his academic background in ways that make them particularly insidious. Each attack serves as both criminal enterprise and psychological experiment, generating data about human behavior under extreme stress, while simultaneously serving his larger goals of spreading terror throughout Gotham's population. His victims are chosen not for their wealth or political connections, but for their psychological profiles, selected to test specific hypotheses about fear responses in different demographic groups. The confrontation between Batman and Scarecrow represents more than just hero versus villain. It becomes a battle between different philosophies of fear's role in human experience. Batman uses fear as a tool for justice, cultivating a reputation for inevitability and supernatural capabilities that makes criminals hesitate before acting. Scarecrow views fear as an end in itself, the pure expression of human nature stripped of all civilizing influences. "You understand, don't you?" Scarecrow asks Batman during one of their encounters, his voice distorted by the gas mask that has become part of his iconic appearance. "You use fear just as I do. The only difference is that you pretend your motives are noble, while I embrace the honest pursuit of terror for its own sake." Batman's response reflects his understanding that fear, properly applied, can serve justice, while improperly used, becomes a form of torture. Fear should protect the innocent, not prey upon them. What you do isn't psychology, it's sadism with academic credentials. Dr. Jervis Tetch represents a different category of Arkham inmate, the brilliant mind consumed by obsession, to the point where reality becomes secondary to fantasy, where other human beings exist only as props in elaborate scenarios designed to recreate fictional narratives that have consumed the perpetrator's entire sense of identity. The Mad Hatter's crimes reflect not just criminal intent, but the complete collapse of boundaries between literature and life, between imagination and action. His background in neuroscience provides the technical foundation for mind control devices that transform his victims into unwilling participants in twisted recreations of Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland stories. But the true horror of his crimes lies not in the technology, but in the psychology. The reduction of human beings to characters in stories they never chose to join, the violation of free will in service of one man's inability to distinguish between fiction and reality. The mind control chips that Tetch implants in his victims represent the ultimate expression of narcissistic personality disorder. The belief that other people exist solely to serve his psychological needs, that their thoughts, feelings, and desires are less important than his fantasies about how they should behave. His crimes become elaborate theatrical productions, where he serves as both director and star, while his victims are reduced to mindless performers in scenarios that satisfy his need for control and admiration. Everyone needs a hobby. The Mad Hatter tells the police officers who finally arrest him, his voice carrying the cheerful tone of someone discussing weekend gardening rather than multiple kidnapping and assault charges. Some people collect stamps, others grow roses. I collect mines and arrange them into more pleasing patterns. Bane's arrival in Gotham represents the introduction of a new category of threat, not just another costumed criminal or psychologically damaged genius, but a force of nature whose combination of tactical brilliance and enhanced physical capabilities challenges every assumption about Batman's invulnerability. The man who will become known as the one who broke the bat embodies something that Gotham's criminal underworld had never seen: a methodical, patient predator whose ultimate goal is not wealth or power, but the complete destruction of everything Batman represents. His background in the hellish prison of Peña Duro provides context for his later criminal activities. This is a man forged by decades of violence and deprivation, shaped by an environment where survival required not just physical strength, but strategic thinking of the highest order. The venom that enhances his already formidable capabilities serves not as a crutch, but as a force multiplier, turning someone who was already dangerous into something approaching superhuman. Bane's strategy for destroying Batman operates on multiple levels simultaneously: physical, psychological, and tactical. He studies his opponent with the patience of a scholar and the intensity of a predator, learning not just Batman's methods but his motivations, his relationships, his psychological vulnerabilities. The campaign that culminates in their first confrontation represents months of preparation and planning, the systematic dismantling of Batman's support network and operational capabilities. "I was born in darkness," Bane tells Batman during their climactic battle in the ruins of Wayne Manor, his voice amplified by the apparatus that regulates his venom intake. "You merely adopted it. Darkness is my ally, not yours, and it will show you that everything you've built can be destroyed by someone with sufficient will and intelligence." But perhaps the most significant threat to Batman's mission comes not from any individual criminal, but from the systematic coordination of Arkham's inmates under the leadership of Ra's al Ghul and his daughter Talia figures, whose global perspective and centuries of experience make them capable of orchestrating chaos on a scale that dwarfs anything Gotham has previously experienced. Ra's al Ghul represents something unprecedented in Batman's rogues gallery, a villain whose motivations are not personal but philosophical, whose crimes serve larger purposes than individual gratification or revenge. The demon's head views human civilization as a disease that has corrupted the natural world, and his centuries of existence have provided him with both the patience and resources necessary to implement solutions that operate on geological timescales. His organization, the League of Assassins, functions as a global network of operatives dedicated to what Ra's views as environmental necessity: the reduction of human population to sustainable levels through carefully orchestrated disasters that appear natural rather than artificial. From his perspective, figures like Batman represent not enemies but potential allies who might be converted to understanding the mathematical inevitability of his approach to solving humanity's ecological crisis. "You fight crime, detective," Ra's tells Batman during their first meeting, his voice carrying the authority of someone who has witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. "But crime is merely a symptom of the disease that afflicts humanity. I fight the disease itself, overpopulation, environmental destruction, the systematic degradation of everything pure and natural in this world. The relationship between Ra's al Ghul and his daughter Talia introduces romantic complexity into what might otherwise be a straightforward ideological conflict. Talia's genuine affection for Batman creates possibilities for alliance and cooperation that her father's extremist philosophy would normally preclude, while simultaneously serving as a source of internal conflict that challenges both her loyalty to family and her developing feelings for someone whose worldview fundamentally opposes everything she has been taught to value. "My beloved," Talia whispers to Batman during one of their encounters, her voice carrying genuine emotion despite the tactical circumstances that have brought them together. "You could join us, help us create a world worthy of preservation. Your skills, combined with my father's resources and vision, could accomplish things that neither of you could achieve alone." Batman's response reflects his understanding that some forms of justice require compromise while others demand absolute moral clarity. "I want to save the world too, Talia, but not by destroying it first." The coordinated breakout from Arkham Asylum that serves as the climax of this section represents something unprecedented in Gotham's criminal history. Not a random riot or opportunistic escape, but a carefully orchestrated operation designed to test Batman's capabilities against overwhelming odds, while simultaneously demonstrating the futility of containing evil within institutional boundaries. The plan unfolds with military precision, combining Ra's al Ghul's strategic planning with the individual capabilities of Arkham's most dangerous inmates. Scarecrow's fear toxin neutralizes security personnel, while the Mad Hatter's mind control devices turn guards into unwilling accomplices. Bane provides the physical force necessary to breach containment systems, while lesser criminals serve as distractions and expendable resources. But the true genius of the operation lies not in its tactical execution, but in its psychological impact. The demonstration that Batman's mission of containment and rehabilitation is fundamentally flawed, that evil cannot be cured or controlled, but only temporarily restrained. The sight of dozens of costumed criminals rampaging through Gotham's streets, while Batman struggles to respond to multiple simultaneous crises, serves as proof that one man, however skilled and dedicated, cannot protect an entire city from the organized forces of chaos. The battle that follows unfolds across multiple fronts simultaneously. Batman and Robin working to recapture escaped inmates, while Gordon coordinates police response to crimes occurring throughout the city. Alfred monitors communications and provides tactical support from the Batcave, while emergency services struggle to cope with incidents that range from bank robberies to terrorist attacks to mass psychological manipulation. But perhaps the most significant aspect of the crisis is its impact on Gotham's civilian population. The recognition that their safety depends not on institutional protection, but on the continued effectiveness of vigilantes, whose methods operate outside legal and democratic oversight. The Arkham breakout forces the city's residents to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of justice, the reliability of official institutions, and the price they are willing to pay for security. The resolution comes not through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but through the systematic application of everything Batman has learned about his opponent's individual psychologies and motivations. Each criminal must be approached according to their specific pathology. Scarecrow through the deployment of counter-agents that neutralize his fear toxin, the Mad Hatter through the destruction of his control devices, Bane through the strategic disruption of his venom supply. But the true victory lies not in the successful recapture of escaped inmates, but in the demonstration that Batman's network of allies has evolved to the point where it can respond effectively to coordinated threats that would have overwhelmed any individual hero. The cooperation between Batman, Robin, Commissioner Gordon, and the broader law enforcement community proves that justice, when properly organized and intelligently applied, can triumph over even the most sophisticated criminal enterprises. As the last of the escaped inmates are returned to custody and normal operations resume at Arkham Asylum, the crisis leaves behind more than just property damage and traumatized citizens. It establishes new parameters for understanding the scope of threats that Gotham faces, while simultaneously proving that the city's defenders have evolved to meet those threats through cooperation, intelligence, and unwavering commitment to protecting innocent life. The Arkham breakout becomes a watershed moment in Gotham's ongoing war between order and chaos, proof that evil, however organized and well-funded, cannot ultimately triumph over good when that good is supported by strong institutions, loyal allies, and citizens who refuse to surrender their faith in the possibility of justice. The rogues' moment of apparent victory becomes instead the foundation for their ultimate defeat, demonstrating that chaos, by its very nature, contains the seeds of its own destruction. In the labyrinthine corridors of justice that wind through Gotham's moral landscape, no trial has ever carried the weight of cosmic significance quite like the proceeding that unfolds in the abandoned courthouse, where Batman's greatest enemies gather to prosecute not just his crimes, but his very existence as a symbol of justice operating outside the boundaries of legal and democratic oversight. This is not mere criminal proceeding, but philosophical debate, not simple law enforcement, but fundamental inquiry into the nature of heroism itself. The defendants for that is what Batman and Robin become, in this twisted inversion of legal procedure, find themselves facing charges that range from assault and illegal imprisonment to vigilante justice and violation of civil rights. But the real accusation lies deeper than any specific criminal act. They stand accused of representing a form of justice that acknowledges no authority beyond their own moral certainty, that recognizes no oversight beyond their individual conscience, that accepts no limitation beyond their personal definition of right and wrong. The prosecution team represents a coalition of Batman's greatest enemies, united not by friendship or mutual affection, but by shared recognition that the Dark Knight's methods pose existential threats to their individual criminal enterprises and their collective vision of a world where might makes right and the strong prey upon the weak without consequence. The Joker serves as lead prosecutor, his twisted understanding of comedy and tragedy, making him uniquely qualified to expose the contradictions inherent in Batman's approach to justice. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the Joker begins, his voice carrying the theatrical projection of a Shakespearean actor addressing the groundlings while simultaneously suggesting the barely controlled hysteria that defines his every public appearance. We are here today to examine the career of a man who claims to serve justice while systematically violating every principle upon which justice is based. A man who beats confessions from suspects, who destroys private property in pursuit of criminals, who imprisons citizens without trial or due process. The courthouse itself serves as both setting and metaphor for the proceedings half destroyed by explosions and fires that reflect Gotham's ongoing war between order and chaos. Its classical architecture now serving as Gothic reminder that institutions, however noble their original purpose, can be corrupted or destroyed by forces they were never designed to contain. The jury box holds not citizens but mannequins dressed to represent Gotham's population, their painted faces frozen in expressions that suggest both judgment and victimization. Two-Face serves as presiding judge, his scarred features making him the perfect embodiment of justice's dual nature, the impartial arbiter who must balance competing claims of right and wrong, the damaged idealist whose faith in legal procedure has been shattered by exposure to corruption and personal trauma. His every ruling depends on the flip of his coin, chance determining the application of law in ways that perfectly illustrate the arbitrary nature of human justice. The court will come to order, Two-Face announces, his voice carrying both Harvey Dent's remembered authority and Big Bad Harv's barely contained violence. We are here to determine whether the defendant, known as Batman, has committed crimes against the people of Gotham City, and whether his methods serve justice or merely satisfy his personal need for revenge. The Penguin assumes the role of court recorder, his aristocratic pretensions and criminal sophistication, making him ideally suited to document proceedings that exist at the intersection of legal formality and criminal enterprise. Oswald Cobblepot has always prided himself on conducting illegal activities, according to principles of business efficiency and social respectability, making Batman's theatrical approach to crime fighting seem crude and unnecessarily dramatic by comparison. If it please the court, Penguin interjects with the oily courtesy that characterizes all his public interactions. The defense should be reminded that this is a court of law, not a venue for vigilante theatrics. The defendant will be accorded all the rights and privileges that he has systematically denied to others during his career of illegal violence. The trial proceedings unfold according to a logic that mirrors the Joker's understanding of comedy. Each piece of evidence presented serves multiple purposes simultaneously, advancing the legal case against Batman while simultaneously exposing the fundamental absurdity of attempting to apply rational legal principles to the irrational world of costumed crime fighters and supervillains. Witness after witness takes the stand to testify about their encounters with Batman, each account revealing different aspects of his methods and their impact on both criminal and civilian populations. Small-time criminals describe beatings and interrogations that left them physically and psychologically traumatized. Property owners document millions of dollars in damage caused by Batman's pursuits and investigations. Civil rights advocates argue that his methods represent a fundamental threat to constitutional protections and democratic governance. But perhaps the most damaging testimony comes from Dr. HARLEQUIN'S, whose professional expertise in psychology provides scientific credibility to accusations that Batman's methods reflect not justice but pathology, the systematic expression of trauma and guilt through violence directed against criminals who serve as convenient targets for emotions that have no healthy outlet. The defendant exhibits classic symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, complicated by obsessive-compulsive behavior and antisocial personality traits. Dr. Quinzel testifies, her voice carrying the authority of professional expertise despite the circumstances that led to her own criminal transformation. His choice to adopt a bat persona reflects deep-seated anxiety about powerlessness and mortality, while his nocturnal activities serve to recreate the traumatic circumstances of his parents' death in scenarios where he can exercise control and achieve different outcomes. The defense case, presented by Batman himself with Robin serving as co-counsel, must navigate the challenging task of justifying vigilante justice to a jury that consists entirely of its victims. Their argument rests not on legal precedent, but on moral necessity, the contention that sometimes institutional failure creates situations where individual action becomes not just permissible, but obligatory. The prosecution wants you to believe that justice can only occur within official channels, Batman tells the mannequin jury, his voice carrying the conviction of someone who has spent years wrestling with questions of moral authority and personal responsibility. But what happens when those channels are corrupted? What happens when the very institutions designed to protect innocent people become tools for oppressing them? Robin's contribution to the defense focuses on the practical results of their crime-fighting activities. Statistics documenting reduced crime rates in areas where Batman operates, testimony from victims whose attackers were captured through vigilante intervention, evidence of corruption exposed through investigations that official law enforcement could not or would not conduct. You've heard a lot about our methods. Robin addresses the silent jury with the passionate conviction of youth convinced of its own righteousness. But what about our results? How many lives have been saved because criminals know that someone is watching? Someone who won't be bought or intimidated or discouraged by bureaucratic procedures. The trial's climax comes not through legal argument, but through the systematic breakdown of the proceedings themselves, as the fundamental contradictions inherent in attempting to apply rational judicial principles to irrational circumstances become impossible to ignore. The Joker's prosecution devolves into manic performance art that obscures rather than clarifies the issues at stake. Two-Face's rulings become increasingly arbitrary as his coin determines outcomes that satisfy neither legal logic nor poetic justice. But the true revelation comes when Scarecrow deploys fear toxin throughout the courthouse, transforming the trial into nightmare scenario, where all participants must confront their deepest anxieties about justice, authority, and moral responsibility. Under the influence of the toxin, the artificial boundaries between prosecution and defense, between judge and jury, between guilt and innocence, dissolve to reveal the underlying terror that motivates all human attempts to impose order on chaos. Batman's experience under the influence of fear, toxin forces him to confront questions he has spent years avoiding, whether his mission serves justice or merely provides psychological relief from trauma he has never properly processed, whether his methods protect innocent people or simply satisfy his need to exercise control over circumstances that once left him powerless. Whether he represents hope for Gotham's future, or simply another symptom of its ongoing decay. The visions that plague him under Scarecrow's chemical influence show alternate versions of his life. Bruce Wayne, who chose therapy over vigilantism, who used his wealth and influence to support institutional reform rather than individual violence, who found ways to honor his parents' memory that didn't require becoming something inhuman. These phantom alternatives force him to question not just his methods, but his fundamental assumptions about what justice requires and what heroism means. Robin's fear toxin experience reveals different anxieties. The terror of being abandoned by the only family he has known since losing his parents. The fear that his partnership with Batman has corrupted him in ways he doesn't yet understand. The growing suspicion that their mission may be creating more problems than it solves. His visions show him possible futures, where their crime-fighting activities escalate into something approaching war, where the line between hero and vigilante disappears entirely. The resolution of both the trial and the fear toxin crisis comes not through legal verdict or chemical antidote, but through moral choice. The decision to continue their mission, despite understanding its costs and contradictions. The recognition that perfect justice may be impossible, but imperfect justice remains preferable to no justice at all. The trial's aftermath leaves both Batman and Robin changed by the experience of having their methods and motivations subjected to systematic scrutiny. They emerge not with greater certainty about their righteousness, but with deeper understanding of their responsibilities, to themselves, to each other, to the city they have sworn to protect, and to the principles of justice that transcend individual interpretation or personal need. The abandoned courthouse becomes a shrine to moral complexity, its ruins serving as reminder that justice, like the building that once housed it, can be damaged or destroyed, but retains its essential purpose, even when its external form has been compromised. The mannequin jury remains in place, their painted faces offering silent testimony to the impossibility of reducing moral choice to simple procedural formality. But perhaps the most significant outcome of the trial lies not in any specific revelation or legal precedent, but in the demonstration that heroism, properly understood, requires not just courage and skill, but wisdom. The ability to act decisively while remaining open to criticism, to maintain moral clarity while acknowledging ethical complexity, to serve justice, while recognizing that justice itself may be more complicated than any individual understanding can encompass. In the labyrinthine corridors of justice that wind through Gotham's moral landscape, no trial has ever carried the weight of cosmic significance quite like the proceeding that unfolds in the abandoned courthouse, where Batman's greatest enemies gather to prosecute not just his crimes, but his very existence as a symbol of justice operating outside the boundaries of legal and democratic oversight. This is not mere criminal proceeding, but philosophical debate, not simple law enforcement, but fundamental inquiry into the nature of heroism itself. The defendants for that is what Batman and Robin become, in this twisted inversion of legal procedure, find themselves facing charges that range from assault and illegal imprisonment to vigilante justice and violation of civil rights. But the real accusation lies deeper than any specific criminal act. They stand accused of representing a form of justice that acknowledges no authority beyond their own moral certainty, that recognizes no oversight beyond their individual conscience, that accepts no limitation beyond their personal definition of right and wrong. The prosecution team represents a coalition of Batman's greatest enemies, united not by friendship or mutual affection, but by shared recognition that the Dark Knight's methods pose existential threats to their individual criminal enterprises and their collective vision of a world where might makes right and the strong prey upon the weak without consequence. The Joker serves as lead prosecutor, his twisted understanding of comedy and tragedy, making him uniquely qualified to expose the contradictions inherent in Batman's approach to justice. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the Joker begins, his voice carrying the theatrical projection of a Shakespearean actor addressing the groundlings while simultaneously suggesting the barely controlled hysteria that defines his every public appearance. We are here today to examine the career of a man who claims to serve justice while systematically violating every principle upon which justice is based. A man who beats confessions from suspects, who destroys private property in pursuit of criminals, who imprisons citizens without trial or due process. The courthouse itself serves as both setting and metaphor for the proceedings half destroyed by explosions and fires that reflect Gotham's ongoing war between order and chaos. Its classical architecture now serving as Gothic reminder that institutions, however noble their original purpose, can be corrupted or destroyed by forces they were never designed to contain. The jury box holds not citizens but mannequins dressed to represent Gotham's population, their painted faces frozen in expressions that suggest both judgment and victimization. Two-Face serves as presiding judge, his scarred features making him the perfect embodiment of justice's dual nature, the impartial arbiter who must balance competing claims of right and wrong, the damaged idealist whose faith in legal procedure has been shattered by exposure to corruption and personal trauma. His every ruling depends on the flip of his coin, chance determining the application of law in ways that perfectly illustrate the arbitrary nature of human justice. "The court will come to order," Two-Face announces, his voice carrying both Harvey Dent's remembered authority and Big Bad Harv's barely contained violence. "We are here to determine whether the defendant, known as Batman, has committed crimes against the people of Gotham City, and whether his methods serve justice or merely satisfy his personal need for revenge." The Penguin assumes the role of court recorder, his aristocratic pretensions and criminal sophistication, making him ideally suited to document proceedings that exist at the intersection of legal formality and criminal enterprise. Oswald Cobblepot has always prided himself on conducting illegal activities, according to principles of business efficiency and social respectability, making Batman's theatrical approach to crime fighting seem crude and unnecessarily dramatic by comparison. If it please the court, Penguin interjects with the oily courtesy that characterizes all his public interactions. The defense should be reminded that this is a court of law, not a venue for vigilante theatrics. The defendant will be accorded all the rights and privileges that he has systematically denied to others during his career of illegal violence. The trial proceedings unfold according to a logic that mirrors the Joker's understanding of comedy. Each piece of evidence presented serves multiple purposes simultaneously, advancing the legal case against Batman while simultaneously exposing the fundamental absurdity of attempting to apply rational legal principles to the irrational world of costumed crime fighters and supervillains. Witness after witness takes the stand to testify about their encounters with Batman, each account revealing different aspects of his methods and their impact on both criminal and civilian populations. Small-time criminals describe beatings and interrogations that left them physically and psychologically traumatized. Property owners document millions of dollars in damage caused by Batman's pursuits and investigations. Civil rights advocates argue that his methods represent a fundamental threat to constitutional protections and democratic governance. But perhaps the most damaging testimony comes from Dr. HARLEQUIN'S, whose professional expertise in psychology provides scientific credibility to accusations that Batman's methods reflect not justice but pathology, the systematic expression of trauma and guilt through violence directed against criminals who serve as convenient targets for emotions that have no healthy outlet. The defendant exhibits classic symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, complicated by obsessive-compulsive behavior and antisocial personality traits. Dr. Quinzel testifies, her voice carrying the authority of professional expertise despite the circumstances that led to her own criminal transformation. His choice to adopt a bat persona reflects deep-seated anxiety about powerlessness and mortality, while his nocturnal activities serve to recreate the traumatic circumstances of his parents' death in scenarios where he can exercise control and achieve different outcomes. The defense case, presented by Batman himself with Robin serving as co-counsel, must navigate the challenging task of justifying vigilante justice to a jury that consists entirely of its victims. Their argument rests not on legal precedent, but on moral necessity, the contention that sometimes institutional failure creates situations where individual action becomes not just permissible, but obligatory. The prosecution wants you to believe that justice can only occur within official channels, Batman tells the mannequin jury. his voice carrying the conviction of someone who has spent years wrestling with questions of moral authority and personal responsibility. But what happens when those channels are corrupted? What happens when the very institutions designed to protect innocent people become tools for oppressing them? Robin's contribution to the defense focuses on the practical results of their crime-fighting activities. Statistics documenting reduced crime rates in areas where Batman operates, testimony from victims whose attackers were captured through vigilante intervention, evidence of corruption exposed through investigations that official law enforcement could not or would not conduct. You've heard a lot about our methods. Robin addresses the silent jury with the passionate conviction of youth convinced of its own righteousness. But what about our results? How many lives have been saved because criminals know that someone is watching? Someone who won't be bought or intimidated or discouraged by bureaucratic procedures. The trial's climax comes not through legal argument, but through the systematic breakdown of the proceedings themselves. As the fundamental contradictions inherent in attempting to apply rational judicial principles to irrational circumstances become impossible to ignore, the Joker's prosecution devolves into manic performance art that obscures rather than clarifies the issues at stake. Two-Face's rulings become increasingly arbitrary as his coin determines outcomes that satisfy neither legal logic nor poetic justice. But the true revelation comes when Scarecrow deploys fear toxin throughout the courthouse, transforming the trial into nightmare scenario, where all participants must confront their deepest anxieties about justice, authority, and moral responsibility. Under the influence of the toxin, the artificial boundaries between prosecution and defense, between judge and jury, between guilt and innocence, dissolve to reveal the underlying terror that motivates all human attempts to impose order on chaos. Batman's experience under the influence of fear toxin forces him to confront questions he has spent years avoiding, whether his mission serves justice or merely provides psychological relief from trauma he has never properly processed, whether his methods protect innocent people or simply satisfy his need to exercise control over circumstances that once left him powerless, whether he represents hope for Gotham's future or simply another symptom of its ongoing decay. The visions that plague him under Scarecrow's chemical influence show alternate versions of his life. Bruce Wayne, who chose therapy over vigilantism, who used his wealth and influence to support institutional reform rather than individual violence, who found ways to honor his parents' memory that didn't require becoming something inhuman. These phantom alternatives force him to question not just his methods, but his fundamental assumptions about what justice requires and what heroism means. Robin's fear toxin experience reveals different anxieties. The terror of being abandoned by the only family he has known since losing his parents. The fear that his partnership with Batman has corrupted him in ways he doesn't yet understand. The growing suspicion that their mission may be creating more problems than it solves. His visions show him possible futures, where their crime-fighting activities escalate into something approaching war, where the line between hero and vigilante disappears entirely. The resolution of both the trial and the fear toxin crisis comes not through legal verdict or chemical antidote, but through moral choice. The decision to continue their mission, despite understanding its costs and contradictions. The recognition that perfect justice may be impossible, but imperfect justice remains preferable to no justice at all. The trial's aftermath leaves both Batman and Robin changed by the experience of having their methods and motivations subjected to systematic scrutiny. They emerge not with greater certainty about their righteousness, but with deeper understanding of their responsibilities, to themselves, to each other, to the city they have sworn to protect, and to the principles of justice that transcend individual interpretation or personal need. The abandoned courthouse becomes a shrine to moral complexity, its ruins serving as reminder that justice, like the building that once housed it, can be damaged or destroyed, but retains its essential purpose, even when its external form has been compromised. The mannequin jury remains in place, their painted faces offering silent testimony to the impossibility of reducing moral choice to simple procedural formality. But perhaps the most significant outcome of the trial lies not in any specific revelation or legal precedent, but in the demonstration that heroism, properly understood, requires not just courage and skill, but wisdom. The ability to act decisively while remaining open to criticism, to maintain moral clarity while acknowledging ethical complexity, to serve justice, while recognizing that justice itself may be more complicated than any individual understanding can encompass.